Welcome back, listeners. This is Matt Goes to the Movies, and this is part 2 of our Star Wars anniversary episode. Harrison and Rob are back, and for part 2, we're going to be discussing the Disney releases for Star Wars, which include Rogue One, Solo, and the very, very, let's say... Rob, what word would you want to use? Decisive sequel trilogy? Divisive.
Yeah, I think, kind of like we talked about in the episode we recorded prior, I think Force Awakens is universally well liked. It may not necessarily be everyone's favorite Star Wars movie, but I think most people at least had fun with it. Number 2 gets very, very divisive. It's either love it or hate it. I don't think there's a lot of people that could take it or leave it. I think it's love it or hate it with that one. And Rise of Skywalker, I kind of think is the same way. I'm not sure there's a lot of people that are kind of meh on it. I think most people have strong feelings.
Yeah, Harrison, what's your take on the thought of the sequel trilogy? Granted, we'll get a lot more into it, but just your initial knee-jerk reaction.
My initial knee-jerk reaction now that the trilogy is complete is that it frustrates me. Like, the amount of frustration that I just have sitting here, even without this podcast, just thinking about the sequel trilogy. Because you have everything from The Force Awakens, which I will save what I have to say about it until we get to it, to The Last Jedi, which I've made my stance kind of clear on. It's the opposite of Rob's. And then the Rise of Skywalker, which just is a mess. Well, I don't want to say too much until we get there. The Rise of Skywalker and just the entire sequel trilogy from its creation and inception is just messy altogether. And that frustrates me. But either way, I love it because it's Star Wars, and I'm extremely excited to talk about it and finally have the opportunity to ruin Rob's incorrect opinion about The Last Jedi.
All right. Well, before you get super excited to do that, we're going to talk about the 2 standalone movies, so to speak, in Rogue One and Solo. And really, we'd like to kick it off with Rogue One, which is a movie that was... if I remember it very well, there were a lot of concerning reports regarding Rogue One, from a new director, from reshoots to the entire ending being reshot. There wasn't a lot of good publicity about this movie, from what I remember. But for me personally, and obviously we'll get into greater detail about it, this turned into be one of the best Star Wars movies to me, and something that's going to get a spinoff on Disney Plus. I did not expect Rogue One to be as good as it was, and not just good, but to me, great. Harrison, I'll let you go first. What was your initial reaction to the announcement of Rogue One? Did you hear any of these things that were going on behind the scenes? And, your initial thoughts before we get really deep into certain things about the movie.
Yeah, this is actually really interesting that you went to me first, because I have to clarify something with both Rogue One and The Force Awakens. So from September of 2015 to September of 2017, I was very secluded from everything pop culture. I was serving as a missionary for my church, which just insights into it when it's similar to military service, but also completely different. But the reason it's similar to military service is you're completely removed from everything kind of outside of what you're doing as a missionary. So just as the rules of being a missionary, we don't watch movies. We don't listen to music. Like everything pop culture, you're just 100% removed from and just focused 100% on church stuff. But you still live in the world, obviously. I still went to Walmart and bought food. So I saw posters for Star Wars. And I remember seeing the trailer for Star Wars The Force Awakens and knowing that I was going to be on my mission at the time and not be able to see it and being frustrated, come on, just by a few months. And then obviously I like heard nothing about Rogue One until I came home, and my brother was like, "Oh, one of the things you missed," he's catching me up on everything. He's like, "You missed Rogue One, like one of the best Star Wars movies ever." And I was like, "Rogue what? What's Rogue One?" So like I missed all of it. I'll talk a little bit more about The Force Awakens because like I remember like specifically there at the Walmart I would buy groceries at. There was this huge poster of Rey, and I remember like one day the person I was living with at the time, him and I were just standing there looking at it like, what are we missing out on? So the only hype I had for Rogue One was from my brother who was like, you've got to watch this. This is great. And so I had no expectations for it outside of him that this is like a new Star Wars that I should watch. And then I watched it and I was like, all he told me is he said it's one of the best Star Wars films he's ever seen and that it makes the line from A New Hope that much better. And I was like, okay, I'm excited to watch it. And I watched it and I was like, wow, you are spot on. This is one of the best Star Wars movies I've ever seen. And it's instantly became one of my favorites.
Very cool. Rob, what was your initial thoughts on Rogue One? Harrison just said, obviously, he didn't really hear anything about it, but were you, privy to, hearing all of the so-called production troubles and everything? And what was your first thought when you did see Rogue One?
I was excited to see an expansion of the universe. I was very excited that we were going to get an opportunity to see some of the stories of all of these important events that happen behind the scenes throughout the Skywalker saga. I was really enjoying the fact that Disney was going to go ahead and extend this universe that had only really lived on in comics and games and books at that point. And really give it full on, make it feel canon, make it feel like everybody's participating and can go see the film. As far as the behind the scenes stuff, it's not something that I really day in and day out spend a lot of time because so much of it is contradictory. So much of it is he said, she said. I try to stay as far out of it as I can. I typically want to just enjoy the films because I think they say never meet your heroes. I think don't pay too close of attention to your heroes either, because eventually you'll find out that a lot of these people that you look up to are actually kind of terrible in certain ways. And so the less I pay attention, the more I can just enjoy the artist and their work, I guess is kind of my way to look at it. So I wasn't really paying a whole lot of attention. I had heard some of it. And I guess the reason I would have paid maybe a little more attention to this than I would other kinds of Hollywood gossip is Star Wars is important to me. If you've made it to this far, you probably have figured out that Star Wars is important to me. It's important to Harrison. It's important to Matt. So I just want Star Wars to be good. I want it to continue to live on. I want it to continue to generate new content because I love the universe. I've enjoyed so much of what's been created. I love watching my kids run around the backyard. Harrison told us a great story on the last episode of playing with lightsabers with his brother. My kids currently do that. So if you think about how many generations of kids have run around how many backyards all across, not just America, but I'm going to say the world at this point, with plastic lightsabers making the noise. Like every kid's made that noise. Like how many kids have not made the lightsaber noise at any point in their lifetime? Like it's probably very few, of anybody who's actually aware of this. And generations of kids have gone through that. And I want to see that continue. I want to see Star Wars stay cool. So yeah, I had a little bit more of a concern. But I was interested of the story they picked. And I really wanted to see it. I thought it was really a compelling one to choose. And it turns out it became a pretty damn good movie.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that it did well, and it did many things well, it gave you two minimum. I mean, at minimum, it gave you the two main characters that were, I thought, awesome. I thought they were both super relatable. And that's Jyn Erso, played by Felicity Jones, and Cassian, who's played by Diego Luna. I thought they were both incredible. And I thought that they both had really good stories that you could attach to and understand certain things that they did. there's one really, I thought, again, there's so many things that this movie does right, but there's one really powerful line in there where they start to argue about what Cassian's plan was when they're going to confront Jin's father, and this is later on in the movie, but he just says, some of us don't have the pleasure of just picking and choosing when we're doing this. Like, I've been in this fight since I was 9 years old. And again, it makes the universe feel lived in. Like, this is a guy who's seen, and had to understand that sometimes he has to do things to survive. And he's known is how to just like fight, so to speak, and do what he can do. So I thought those two main characters were first and foremost phenomenal. Like, once again, they created two characters that were like, wow. Yeah, I would have loved to see more from these guys. But again, like, I think everything about this movie makes sense and how it wrapped up at the end. But I thought these two were great. Rob, what were your thoughts on them?
Yeah, and not only were they great, but I really think this might be among the best ensemble casts we've gotten in Star Wars. Typically we focus on just a few characters. The big ones, certainly the Skywalker lineage, so to speak, tends to dominate, and Obi-Wan as well. Tends to, and their immediate group, but we have quite a few other characters that are interesting and not just there to fill in the background. Their Imperial droid, K2SO, is super fun. I really enjoyed him.
Yeah, he was good.
Sometimes in some, we talked a little bit yesterday. We really didn't talk much about Jar Jar. Like, I'm very surprised we barely talked about it at all. We just kind of said, yeah, he's not great, and moved on. But when Star Wars tries too hard to put a witty character in, it falls flat on its face. When they just let it really witty writing work instead of trying to force it, like what we get with the droids, most droids really. It's so much fun. We get Donnie Yen in this, who's, I'm a big fan of his work internationally and some of the things he's done here in the United States. It was great to see him in Star Wars. I really liked the relationship between him and I'm struggling to remember the character's name, who basically is like the heavy gunner. I wasn't sure exactly what it was. I wasn't positive if they were friends, brothers, or something else, but I found that relationship to be very, very compelling. I love the ensemble.
Yeah, Harrison, where do you stand on not just the main characters, but I think Rob makes a good point. The cast, like, everybody plays a really good part in this movie.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. And like, okay, spoilers if you haven't seen Rogue One, everyone dies at the end. Everyone.
Yes. Yeah, we should mention. Sorry, Harrison. Like, sorry. Yeah, this, just like part one, this is all spoilers. So yeah. Apologies for that. We'll get that out of the way. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So yeah, there you go. There's a spoiler warning. Everyone dies at the end of Rogue One. And it's amazing that, having seen the film the first time, how, one, you're instantly invested in these characters in the morally gray areas that we see of the rebellion with Cassian and Jin. So I think Felicity Jones just knocks it out of the park with this role. I can't say enough good about Donnie Yen. Alan Tudyk is K2SO. What more could you want from a droid in Star Wars than Alan Tudyk? It's great, but even to come back to this movie a second time, knowing these people all die, but yet I still so much am invested in them and their personal struggles and conflicts, knowing that it's all kind of, for something so much bigger than themselves. It's interesting to be able to care about characters in such a limited time, and the cast is great. Riz Ahmed. He's in Star Wars. Mads Mikkelsen, Ben Mendelsohn. Forrest Whitaker. We could keep going. This cast is amazing, and every single character they play is great. I love the cast in this movie. I think that's one of the things that it has going extremely well is the cast and the characters, both sides of it.
Yeah, let's not forget, though, that this cast-wise, I can't believe you would leave this out. This might have Rob's favorite person on the planet. Ryan Johnson is in this movie, and we know how much he loves him. So
we'll get to it, but somebody on the Facebook page made the comment, and I'm going to use it forever, and called him Ruin Johnson, and that's my favorite thing. That's that's my favorite thing that's happened in 2021. That is my favorite thing.
You hadn't heard that before?
No, I'd never heard that.
Oh my gosh,
I loved it.
It was everywhere. Oh man.
Yeah, so he is in this movie, which I find kind of funny actually for some reason. But speaking of the cast, before we get into any other major details, I mean, it's a small scene, but man, it just kind of his dark sense of humor. And we knew he was going to be in the movie. I didn't know how, but I mean, let's talk about showing Vader and him being intimidating. Just the small scene that he has, like, this goes back to a time when, like, Vader was feared. You can tell how nervous people are around him. In particular, Orson, his character, the general, and just like his humor with, careful not to choke on your aspirations, and
such a great line.
Like even him being in that, like bath tank before he comes out, and the door opening and his shadow, and we don't even have to talk about the ending with him yet, but just that scene alone was like, yeah, this was Vader when he was like feared. It was great to see him again. I thought they absolutely like nailed Vader in this movie. Harrison, I'll let you go first.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I love that scene when he's talking to Matt Mikkelsen's character. I think it's like one of the best things ever. Is that scene, and then just have him at the end. How can you have a story in this time in the Republic, in Star Wars, in the Rebellion, and not have Darth Vader? And that was one of the worries. Is like, okay, if they try and connect this, Vader's either not going to be really good or going to be wasted, or like incorporating Vader in a way that's intimidating and worthwhile and exciting to the fans is not a task that I am jealous of having to do. And I think that it was handled perfectly. The way that he is a foil to Matt Mikkelsen's villain, but at the same time I don't know. I love Vader in this because it's so small, but when he is there, he's just ultimately intimidating. And it makes every other moment in the rest of the original trilogy that much better. It's like, yeah, that is Vader. Kind of like if you haven't seen Mandalorian, spoiler for season 2, it kind of likes the wish fulfillment of seeing Luke come back and be the boss that he is at the end of that. Same thing here with Vader.
Yeah, I mean, that scene in The Mandalorian mimics the scene here in Rogue One, when Vader shows up for his second appearance. But Rob, what did you think of their utilization of Vader in this movie?
I really liked Harrison's comparison to that scene in Mandalorian. I think we might have even made that comparison on the recap show when that was on the air and we were doing that weekly. It felt very similar. And frankly, in the original trilogy, there's not a whole lot of opportunity where you see fully powered up Force users just absolutely kicking ass and taking names and just, going ham. Really, we don't get a lot of it, and those two scenes are very similar in that way. In fact, I want to say there's even some cuts out there where you can watch them like frame by frame laid next to each other.
Yes,
there's quite a few similarities, and it's awesome. I think one of the traps of a character like Darth Vader is using him too much, because if this movie had 4 scenes like this, I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it. It had exactly the perfect number of scenes like this. It didn't make it about him. It made him feared and intimidating. But there's such a thing as seeing him too much. I think if you go back to like the first Jaws film, part of the reason Jaws worked so well is you barely saw the shark. They didn't have to try to make the shark really like super scary because they just didn't show him. And what you didn't see was far more frightening than what you did see. The original Alien film, I think, works a lot like that too. By having him on there too much, I don't think it has the same effect. But it was great. And I know that this is a scene a lot of fans have reacted to. And what I'm hoping is that the bean counters at Disney don't hear that and go, okay, guys, we're doing a whole bunch more Rebellion era movies that are in the expanded universe. And Darth Vader is going to show up and force choke everybody. That's like, I hope that's not what happens.
Yeah, no, I think you put it perfectly. It's just the right amount of Vader in this movie. Again, it shows him as being intimidating, but he's not front and center. It's okay, like he is a major player in the background and people are doing things like under his guise, but it doesn't oversaturate the movie with him because again, like this wasn't this wasn't supposed to be his story. So I did like that. The ending scene, though, where he just absolutely destroys everybody in that hallway that we talked about and how the Mandalorian like mimics that was entirely part of the reshoots. Like that was not in the original cut of this movie. But I've never been able to find exactly what the ending was before they decided to go back and redo that. Robert Harrison, have you heard anything about like what the original cut was?
I think of the three of us, Matt, you're probably the resident expert on director's cuts and differences between them.
I'll have to look that up.
I don't know. I'm like reading through the IMDb trivia page as fast as I can, and I read kind of slow, so don't be waiting on me.
Yeah, no, I always found that like really fascinating, but I could never find anything on it that it was like, well, this wasn't even supposed to be in the original cut, and then we decided that we needed something to tie it, a little bit more to A New Hope. And it's actually, I don't know if you guys have done it, but it's actually just really cool, and it's small, but finishing Rogue One and then immediately starting A New Hope. It's really cool just to see that. It makes it a little bit awkward in the fact that like Vader is absolutely just plowing through these guys, and then he's, he acts like he's in wet cement when he fights Obi-Wan. His movements are not the same anymore, and it is supposed to be a short period of time. But just seeing the ending scene with the CGI Leia, which I thought looked at least decent, and going right to the ship being chased in A New Hope is actually kind of cool. Have you guys done that?
I have never done it. Matt, I think something you said on the previous episode, I actually want to talk about a little bit as it relates to Star Wars. You said that when you go through and watch these, you now watch them in episode order. You start at 1, probably skip 2, and kind of go all the way through. There is a discussion amongst fans about what the right order to watch it in is. Do you watch it that way, or do you start in the release dates? Do you start with episode 4 and then watch it through that way, the way that it was released? And I think that's probably. Then there's this other thing called the hatchet order, where you start with 4 and 5, and then you skip to 1, 2, and 3 as kind of flashback, and then finish with Vader's redemption and Return of the Jedi. I think that's kind of silly, but look, there's a lot of ways to enjoy Star Wars, but I kind of feel like you maybe start with Rogue One if you want, and then go ahead and do your original trilogy. And if you want to jump backwards in time, I don't know. What's the right way?
Harrison, do you have a particular way that you watch them?
I watch it
episode 1, 2, 3, Rogue One, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then just have I ever rewatched Solo? No. So wherever that fits, if I decide to rewatch it.
Yeah, Solo actually fits in between Revenge of the Sith and Rogue One in terms of what happens in the timeline. That movie is right in between Revenge of the Sith and Rogue One. So I watched them, and when I rewatched Solo, I did watch these movies in that order. Again, that's just something that I do. And again, yeah, I mean, totally skip part 2.
Pick your favorite episode of the Clone Wars animated series and watch a couple of those instead.
Yeah, I mean, well, once you start that show, you really can't stop it because it just gets better and better. But yeah, I mean, to just, follow up though, I mean, with Rogue One, and it really gave me hope of like, oh wow, this seems like something that is really going to work. I mean, it made over $1 million at the box office, which everybody always looks at in terms of, hey, is something going to get greenlit for a sequel? What's going on?
I think you meant $1 billion. You meant $1 billion, right?
Yes, a billion. Sorry.
You had a Dr. Evil moment.
I did. But so it made, a really good amount of money, was fairly well received. I don't think you see a lot of people bad mouthing Rogue One. And that kind of leads us into, and we'll get to our favorite scene from Rogue One, because that will lead us into Solo, which I think, even though it's a good movie, there's problems, but I have one thing that I think is the biggest problem with Solo that I'll get to. But Harrison, with Rogue One, again, I think there's a lot because this movie does so much right. Do you have just an absolute favorite scene from this movie?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I cut off a bit. So, to pick one absolute scene would be really hard because I really love pretty much the entire thing. I would say if I had to pick one, I'm just going to throw out, 2, if that's okay. Yeah. I love the scene where they're on the planet. Forgive me, I'm not going to remember because my memory is fading. But when they're what planet are they on? Where they're flying away from it blowing up by the Death Star. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yep. I'm.
Whatever. It doesn't matter. Whatever planet they're on, seeing them fly through the rubble of the explosion is like one of the most tense scenes of all of Star Wars. When K2SO says, "There's no horizon." I love that scene. But my favorite would probably be just the entire scene on the Scarif base when they're trying to get the plans for the Death Star. The rebel troops show up and they're trying to make it through the barrier shield, and then they finally do land, and then you have the ground battle. Don't get me wrong, that scene with Darth Vader is great, and I love it. But I love everything that happens before that. That would just be from the moment from the moment Rogue One lands on Scarif to the end of the film is my favorite. That's a big section, but
right. It is Jeddah is the city.
Jeddah, that's where it is.
Rob, do you have a favorite scene in this movie that stands out?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to what Harrison said. Yeah, as much as it's great to watch Darth Vader just waltz down that hall, murking people. The final battle, there's Star Wars is known for a lot of things. One of the many things that it's known for is it's just massive scale battles where there are real stakes involved. And this battle on the beach, it's different. We haven't seen it yet. And there's these characters slowly come to terms with the fact that this mission is a one-way, that there's not a return trip for them.
Yeah.
And seeing them come to that understanding that it was probably always going to be that way, but they held out hope that maybe one or two of them, maybe all of them could get in, get out, and get back. and live to serve the rebellion another day. But kind of watching them slowly come to that realization and knowing what they have to do to continue the mission and the points that they choose to make their sacrifice for the betterment of the mission, for the betterment of the rebellion, is really powerful stuff. This is a great movie. I mean, Star Wars is a series of trilogies, except for these two films. These are self-contained films. Yes, they tie into the larger story, but they tell one story. They're not trying to set up Solo is definitely trying to set something up, but Rogue One works so well because it's one story. You don't have to wait for another film to decide on whether or not you like the last one because of what it did to lead into it. It tells one complete story. It gives you interesting, unique characters, new characters that it doesn't have to necessarily go back on anything that's happened before. You're not stuck with previous interpretations of these characters. And I think that's why I like it so much.
Yeah, I think what you guys, again, the easy thing is to sit there and say that it's Vader, but just that whole ending battle scene on the beach and everything, it's just so well done. And then, yeah, just them coming to the realization and then just sitting on the beach, embracing each other, as you can see the planet start to get incinerated, it's really powerful. It's great stuff. You feel for these characters, and it gives you like an appreciation of like what they sacrificed to get to A New Hope, and then the Empire, like to set that in motion, so to speak. So I really like that. I think that's a great point. But I think that leads us into Solo. And Harrison, you said you didn't. And Rob, I can't remember. When was the last time you've seen Solo? Rob, go ahead. Go first.
It's been a while. I haven't seen it in a while. It's not one that if I'm, watching Star Wars with the kids or something like that, or just on my own to put on in the background, it's not one that I pull out pretty regularly to be like, oh yeah, let's check that one out. And I guess it's kind of a shame because this movie is known as a box office bomb, so to speak. It made back its budget, but I don't think it did what people thought it would do. It didn't do that billion with a B number. It's laughable to think that a Star Wars film could not make all of the money. Making a Star Wars or a Marvel film is pretty much like a license to print money. Like, I think the U.S. Treasury just backs up a mint, a printing press to the studio lot and says, all right, boys, let it run, as soon as the movie opens. And that's definitely what's going to happen when Black Widow comes out later this year. And this one didn't. And it's not necessarily a terrible movie. It's really not. It's something different. They tried a little too hard on certain things. I think they tried to tie too many things in all at the same time, and they tried to give us an explanation for literally everything, and that we didn't really need. And they could have just told us a good story.
Yeah, Harrison. When was the last time that you saw Solo?
The last time I saw it was in 2018 when it was released in theaters for the first time. That was it. I agree with Rob. It's really interesting, just like in the timing of it. This is the next film to come out in the Star Wars after The Last Jedi, which, say whatever your opinion is about The Last Jedi, the response to it would be concerning at Disney. People loved it and other people hated it. So you're starting to pump the brakes a little bit, and then Solo does really bad. Yeah, the Solo is kind of the film that is the reasons Disney stopped cranking out Star Wars like they were, and have taken kind of a hiatus from it. And what's a bummer is that the movie isn't bad; it's just completely unnecessary. I'm interested in a story about Han Solo, especially with the actor who played him. What's his name? Alden Ehrenreich. I mispronounced his last name. Whatever his name is. He did a great job, and I think he was as good as you could get at a young Harrison Ford. But it's just this was unnecessary. I don't care he got his blaster. I particularly didn't really care about how he found Chewie. I would have been more interested in seeing him become a scoundrel, And it just it's why why am I watching this? Why am I watching this besides the title Star Wars next to it? And that's not enough reason with a film that's just so mediocre like this.
Yeah, I think because I did watch this back, and it's actually a pretty fun movie. I think again, he did a very good job actually of portraying like a young Han Solo and seeing kind of that, free will spirit that he has. But I think one of the main problems that happened with this movie is not so much that it came out after The Last Jedi, that it didn't come out before The Last Jedi. I think they really missed on an opportunity to try and capitalize, and I could be 100% wrong, but I think they missed out on capitalizing after The Force Awakens and Han Solo's death. I think maybe more people would have gone and seen this had they released it at a different time, but I mean, basically, yeah, this movie killed like what they were planning to do with Solo films, and they were like, "Geez, we should take a step back and think about what we're doing here, and maybe not pump out Star Wars movies at the pace that we were thinking of doing." But it's fun.
I was going to say, it's kind of a bummer that it's that way. I kind of wanted to add an addendum to what I said. This movie is a ton of fun. Like there isn't anything about this movie that's inherently bad. It's just not great. Like if this were a movie that belonged in any universe outside of Star Wars, particularly like if this was like a Godzilla movie, but it was the exact same, if you can just follow what I'm saying here, I would be like, this is exactly what it needs to be. It's dumb, simple fun, and it's really entertaining to watch. But because it's Solo, a Star Wars story, suddenly there's like this new importance that like fun doesn't seem good enough, which is kind of weird. But it's weird because I watched it and I was like, it's fun. And a lot of my coworkers were like, oh, I'm not going to go see it. And I was really adamant, like, you should go see it. It's well made. It's a ton of fun. The actor does a great job. But revisiting it, I don't have the same motivation.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a little distracted because now I kind of want to see Godzilla fly a Millennium Falcon. But Rob, any like follow-up thoughts on that?
It was clear at the end of this that they had more plans to continue on with this character, with these characters portraying, with these actors portraying these characters at this age. It really sets up something at the end that they were going to continue this. And that was kind of the plan when we knew that there was going to be a new trilogy, but then there was going to be interspliced with it, these other stories that were going to flesh out the universe that weren't necessarily a trilogy or they would tell these other backstories and things like that. And it was supposed to alternate years. We were supposed to get a major trilogy film, and then we were going to get a catalog film, and then another trilogy film, and then another exposition kind of film. And yeah, it just completely stopped with Solo. I mean, I would love to know some of the other stories they're kicking around. It kind of makes you wonder if some of the things they were talking about are working their way to Disney Plus instead. I think there's maybe a little more leniency for a 9-episode TV show than maybe a Star Wars film, which has certain expectations to it. This is not as bad of a movie, I think, as some people make it out to be. And I kind of wanted to see what they were going to do with this next. I feel like I'd heard, and Matt, you'll probably know the answer to this, was there not possibly going to be a trilogy that this film would have kicked off? Or at least, I mean, there had to have been at least a sequel talked about.
Yeah, there was plans of a trilogy because it really was going to. I mean, one of the huge, like one of the only major things that happens, and again, it's a good movie, it's fun, but one of the only things that happens in this movie that is worth like any consequence, because okay, we know he's with Chewie, we know he has the Millennium Falcon, we see his relationship with Lando. The only thing of major consequence that happens here is that ending. And wait a minute, that's Darth Maul. And that was planned to show what he's been up to, how he has been spending his time, so to speak, which I thought was really interesting. It was kind of a shame that we didn't get, because if you've looked at any of the outside media and some of the in-between stories, or even seen the Clone Wars or Rebels, some of the things that Darth Maul was doing, it's insanely interesting. So there were plans to try and do a trilogy, but again, this just did not do the box office that they thought it was going to do. So I guess my other question would be about this was, how did the Darth Maul reveal, and Harrison, I'll let you go first. Like, how did that land for you? Was it cheesy? Was it like, oh, that's really cool? Is it kind of like now just fell by the wayside because it never seems like we're going to get anything from that? How did you react to that?
First, I want to make a comment about this having a trilogy. Like, just in case anyone's not aware, this is one of the reasons that whatever season it was of Game of Thrones at the time was delayed, because Emilia Clarke was filming this, so she couldn't film Game of Thrones. Like you don't get Emilia Clarke to delay Game of Thrones unless this movie is serious business. So clearly, it was more than just a one-off. But to your question now of Darth Maul. In the theater, when I saw it for the first time, I reacted, and my initial thought was like, yes, this is sweet. Obviously, we know he's been alive in the Clone Wars. Like I can't wait for more Darth Maul. This is awesome. I'm really excited for Alden Ehrenreich, or whatever his name is, to be more Solo. I think Emilia Clarke would be great as Kira, and then I was excited for these characters to continue. Paul Bettany, I think actually he dies, but I mean, he was great in this. But either way, I just remember being like, I like these actors and how they're treated, these characters. I'm excited for them to be able to continue. And that's sweet that Darth Maul is included in that. Now that that has not happened, looking at it as like, well, that was kind of dumb. And also, why Darth Maul, besides just getting like generic Star Wars fans invested? Like, how does the character of Han Solo having an interaction with Darth Maul, if that's the direction that the second and third film was going to go, some type of battle, so to speak, between Han Solo and Darth Maul? How does that make sense with the Han Solo that we meet in A New Hope? Like, what? I just don't think that was a good idea. It just was kind of like, how can we get people who like Star Wars to buy into this story? Oh, Darth Maul, we'll get him. People like him. Yeah, and it will sell merchandise. So let's get Darth Maul in here. So yeah, kind of a range of emotions about the entire thing.
Yeah. Rob, what were your thoughts with Darth Maul?
I hadn't seen the Clone Wars, but I was aware that he was back in that. And I hadn't really thought about it too much until Harrison had said, like, why would that make sense to have Han Solo cross paths with Darth Maul? Like, why would that make sense? And that's really the danger you get into with prequels when you start telling stories that are out of sequential order. If you think about the MCU and you think about some of the things we see in Captain Marvel, for example, and then you go, well, wait a second, why did Fury never use that pager? Like, there was like 4 or 5 times he probably could have pulled that thing out, and it would have been a great idea to call his magic friend in from outer space to give him a hand. So there's always going to be a danger in not keeping true to what we've already seen. To me, having Darth Maul and then just not following up on it at all, it's kind of like when we meet the leader in The Incredible Hulk. Like, you see the brain start to form, but then it's never talked about ever again. And it just seems just very strange that it's put out there. It's an unresolved plot point. And the fact that they didn't still go ahead and continue anyways really leads me to believe that, much like the sequel trilogy, where there really wasn't a cohesive direction, I don't think they really knew exactly what they were going to do. I kind of agree. I think the whole idea was get the nerds fired up that, this character that was killed off in a terribly stupid way that makes no sense at all, that angered a lot of people. We're going to just bring him back, and we'll figure it out later. It really feels that way.
Yeah, I mean, knowing that we're never going to get a payoff to it, it definitely feels, like such a missed opportunity. It was cool to see him, and I think it's weird because we all say like, yeah, like it's not a terrible movie, but again, with everything that happened, and maybe if we would have gotten something else with this movie, some of these things would have felt, larger and more like relevant. But now you look back at it, and this movie really does seem like completely like pointless in the overall like history of Star Wars, which is disappointing because it kind of makes it like how do you pick a favorite scene in this movie? Like, I don't know. Is it just Darth Maul appearing and like him flashing on his lightsaber? The Parsec run isn't particularly like great. It's just like, yeah, it's fun, but it doesn't go anywhere. So I think it hinders me from saying anything like uniquely positive about it or being like overzealous about talking about this movie. So, Rob, like any follow up on that?
This movie is kind of the ultimate meh. There's not a couple of scenes you can go, oh my God, these scenes are amazing. And there's also not a couple of scenes where you go, what the hell were they thinking? It's just kind of okay.
Yeah. Harrison, anything you want to finish up saying about Solo? Like, do you even have a favorite scene for this movie, or is this just kind of well, it happened?
I'll say this. If anybody's listened to the Falcon and the Winter Soldier episodes we did with Matt's show, I love Erin Kellyman. I'm a huge fan of her. I totally forgot she was in this movie. Like, that's how forgettable this movie is. I forgot she was in it, and I love her. So yeah, it's just as like, I mean, it's unnecessary and it's forgettable. But if I do have a favorite scene, and it's the train scene, that monorail thing where they're trying to steal the stuff from, where Jon Favreau's character dies, and also where Woody Harrelson's wife dies. I thought that was a very well made action sequence. It was a lot of fun. That is one thing that I do remember about the Solo movie. I even forgot that had the Kessel Run in it, but I do remember that train scene. I thought it was very good. So that would be my favorite, just kind of like by default. Like I don't particularly like that scene, but it's the one that I remember, so it just gets a favorite tag by default.
Yeah, Rob, do you like have a favorite scene, or is it more of like just a default thing like Harrison just said?
What, that scene does stand out. I think when he meets Lando for the first time, that scene was kind of fun. And I also think we really didn't get a chance to talk much about Donald Glover. I thought he was really good in this. You think about you think about the impossible job of trying to portray a character, an iconic character, made even more so by the fact that Harrison Ford did it at his Harrison Fordiest. Like there's two roles that forever will be associated with Harrison Ford to the day he dies, no matter what he does. And that's going to be Han Solo and Indiana Jones. Those will be the first two things you think about with Harrison Ford. And Han Solo is, if he's not your favorite Star Wars character, he's up there. It's hard to think he's outside of most people's top 5. If he's outside of most people's top 3 even. So you think about how hard it was to come in and try to portray a younger version of him and still keep the charisma. You still try to keep just the roguish nature of him. He's mostly a good guy, but he's kind of a drug dealer too. Like let's not forget, like he's a spice runner, and in Star Wars, those are drugs. So like, he kind of skirts that line a little bit, but still we find him incredibly charming. It's an incredibly difficult job to do. And I think they pull it off. I think they do the best job they can while still, giving their own interpretations of who these characters are.
Yeah, I think, yeah, just to do a quick follow up, I thought Donald Glover was very good. And again, I think everybody did a perfectly fine job, especially the difficult task of trying to, follow Harrison Ford, so to speak, or make it believe that like yeah, you're believable as the young Han Solo. I think they did good, but you know, unfortunately, this just falls into one of those. I guess it's forgettable, and in a way, that's almost worse than being bad because if you're a bad movie, at least there's something to talk about. Where this one's kind of a struggle for me and for you guys to really just say, well, it's passable. Like, all right, I got a C. Like, I didn't fail my test, but I think that's where we stand on it.
I agree.
So I think, though, that starts leading us into, the sequel trilogy.
The pressure.
So, the sequel trilogy, there's obviously we're going to get into a lot of, the differences that we have in the second movie and some of the polarizing thoughts about the Rise of Skywalker. And obviously the most disappointing, no matter how you feel either way about these movies as individuals, as the trilogy, when you look back at it as three movies, I mean, it has not been a secret since this ended that there was absolutely no roadmap in place whatsoever for these three movies. The Force Awakens came out and it was, hey, do what you want. And I think, we'll get into it, but The Force Awakens for me is spoiler because we're going to reveal rankings later on. This Force Awakens is number one for me. I love The Force Awakens. I think it is absolutely incredible. But they told J.J. Abrams, go ahead and do what you want, and you don't have to consult anybody. And then they get Rian Johnson, and they tell Rian Johnson, you don't need to talk to J.J. Abrams at all. You can do whatever it is you want to do with this movie. And that happens. And that's certainly, in terms of fans and critics, like The Last Jedi is the highest rated Star Wars movie ever by critics. You go and listen to some of the reviews and, it's pretty funny to see the huge disconnect between critics and fans with The Last Jedi. Like, that in itself is pretty amazing how critics rate that movie. And then they go back to Rise of Skywalker and get J.J. Abrams back and go, okay, well, we don't want you to really retcon The Last Jedi, but we kind of don't care if you just throw things away from that movie and act like they didn't happen. And in many ways, The Rise of Skywalker to me feels like a sequel to The Force Awakens and not The Last Jedi. So there's a lot of disconnect with it. But Harrison, we'll get into them individually. So The Force Awakens, obviously you mentioned it, but you see it, you watch it. Where did you think Star Wars was? Because again, in terms of, hey, we're getting a trilogy, this was a long time. Not as long as the first Star Wars, but there was a big, big gap in between getting Revenge of the Sith and getting The Force Awakens. And people were clearly ready for it because, as Rob says, this movie at the time made all the money, just crushing box office records. What were your initial thoughts when you saw The Force Awakens?
So like I said, this was one of those periods when I was serving as a missionary. So I saw the trailer. I wanted to see it really badly, and then I didn't see the movie, and I didn't see it until the end of 2017. Like I watched the Force Awakens at home like weeks before going to see The Last Jedi, and so I missed like all of the excitement about it, except for like that initial trailer and kind of the big reveal. But as far as like the film's release, I was totally outside of that. So coming home, again, similar thing. My brother was hyping me up for it. He's like, I don't know why I remember this, but I remember this is what he said. He's like, you got to watch The Force Awakens. So that was one of like the first things I watched. Was like, how was The Force Awakens? Was it good? And he's like, it's great. He's like, it's like Marvel, like it's like super fun and looks great and it's kind of quippy and it's funny. He's like, it's great. And I was like, sign me up. Sounds good. So I watched it. and it's really interesting is preparing for this podcast, I had a bunch of notes written down kind of along the lines is that I think people are harsh on the sequel trilogy and they forget how much they enjoyed The Force Awakens. And I still agree with that. I think for the most part, every Star Wars fan had a great time watching The Force Awakens. There's a reason it made a ton of money. It's because people went to go watch it. I rewatched it a bunch of that first time because it was like, this is the first time we're getting Star Wars. But I think that it's new Star Wars. It's a new trilogy. And J.J. Abrams' mystery box, great initial setup for a trilogy, is a perfect fit. Rewatching it, and maybe it's because of the trilogy being complete now, or attempted at being complete. Rewatching it, I was like, take it or leave it. I'm not really interested in it. In fact, I was kind of bothered by the second half of it. The first half of it, I was like, yes, this is great. I was right. We do love The Force Awakens. People should remember how much of a good time they had with it. And then we get to the second half and it felt like a New Hope remake. And I was like falling asleep, like genuinely, like it's probably because I was really tired, but I was kind of falling asleep. Like, oh my gosh, I'm like not interested. I completely lost interest. I don't mean that in like a mean or mean spirited way. It was just like, there's something about it this second time around. It's like, I'm kind of indifferent to it. The first half I think is great. The second half I totally lost interest in. And I wonder how much of that is because the trilogy is finished. Either way, I think for the start of a trilogy with nothing else yet made after it, it is one of like the best achievements in Star Wars because it reignited the love everybody had for Star Wars. It introduced new characters, had some old ones. I could go on. I've been talking a lot, but that's kind of my reaction to it is I loved it when I watched it. I was like, man, this is great. The characters were super exciting and I couldn't wait for more.
Rob, what were your initial thoughts on The Force Awakens?
So I watched this movie on January 1st of 2016. I'd been at a New Year's Eve party and coming home the next day, as my wife and I were coming home, we arranged for someone to hang out with our kids. So we had the day to ourselves. And I said, we are finding a movie theater and we're watching Star Wars. Because that's just how it is. I mean, it came out, it was released December 14th of 2015. That's a busy time of year for a lot of people. And as much as I wanted to, there was just no way with little ones at home that I could make that happen. So it was New Year's Day, and I'd been looking forward to that probably as much as going to the New Year's Eve party I was at the night before, which I had a really good time. But after going so long without Star Wars, to have it again, it was incredible. Went and saw it in 3D even. Like I purposely picked a showtime in a theater so that I could see it in 3D. And that was definitely the right decision. Sitting in there, waiting for the trailers to finish. And then you get the title crawl and you get the John Williams score. And it's like I'm 8 years old again. It just instantly transports me back to feeling like I was watching A New Hope for the first time. It was unbelievable how it can do that, how this universe can do that to a person. And I think that's why, the reactions to Star Wars and the emotions around it are as strong as they are because people are so attached to it. There is such an emotional connection that it's hard to, and I'll certainly get into this when we do our rankings. It's hard to actually make logic out of Star Wars at times because we just have too much of an attachment to it. We have too much of our childhoods, in some cases, of our free time wrapped up in it. And I could definitely feel that sitting in the theater, got my 3D glasses on, watching The Force Awakens for the very first time. It really is a shame, though, that Disney didn't have a roadmap to figure out how to do a connected universe. Like nobody had ever done that before. Certainly nobody that ever worked for them had ever done, a roadmap for how to connect multiple films in a row, because, man, that sure would have helped this whole trilogy. Getting to specifically The Force Awakens, it's pretty much commonly accepted that it is a retelling of the major beats of A New Hope. And I'm sort of fine with that because I like A New Hope. I I like it a little bit less on subsequent rewatchings. I mean, when I came out of that theater, I was doing cartwheels. Like I was so excited that Star Wars was back, and not just that Star Wars was back, but we've been kind of talking about how every person kind of has their Star Wars. You know, for Matt and I, it's the original trilogy. For Harrison and a lot of the fans that we've been interacting with on the Facebook page, it seems to be the prequel trilogy. For my kids, I think it'll be the sequel trilogy, or possibly even the Mandalorian. Seeing our characters back, seeing Leia again, the first time we see Han Solo and Chewbacca, and seeing them again, that's a moment. Like, when you've gone without Star Wars for that long, and when you've gone without really good Star Wars for even longer, and you see Han and Chewie back, oh my God! Like, I can't. It's impossible to describe that feeling to somebody else. When Han and Leia share the screen together, it's like they just left from Return of the Jedi and went right into this movie. Like, the way that they work on camera together, it was perfect. It's like they never missed a beat. Clearly, there was a lot of things that have happened in these characters' lives that have led them to the point where they're at. But when you put them back on screen together and you have the Leia theme playing in the background, it's indescribable to somebody who has not been watching these films their whole life.
Yeah, The Force Awakens, I went and saw it opening night. I was there with, everybody else that was like, we have to see it day one. Certainly I did. And I was just enthralled again, knowing that, first we get the announcement that, hey, there's going to be a new Star Wars. And then we get the announcement that the original three are coming back. Like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like, we're going to get Luke, Han, and Leia again. Like, I cannot believe it. And certainly for me, like, I really like J.J. Abrams. So on top of that, like, hearing J.J. Abrams is doing this, I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like, what, like, how could this possibly fail? And for me, even on rewatches, The Force Awakens doesn't fail. Like, I don't care that the second half is a basic rehash of A New Hope. I thought that worked really well. And I thought one of the things that is disappointing, but I can, for myself, separate what happened and what each individual film does. I can look more of it as standalone episodes and not a cohesive trilogy. I'm not really sure how I'm able to do that with this one. But for me, The Force Awakens is so good because of what potentially could have happened. And anytime I watch that, I always think about, like, my mind goes to, okay, well, just, what originally was, what was Snoke originally supposed to be? It certainly wasn't originally supposed to be a clone of Palpatine that somebody, Palpatine created him. How did, Luke's lightsaber end up, finding its way to the cantina, and how did Rey, like, why is it given to Rey? What vision did she have? I just think about it as where this would have gone if it was a coherent story. And for some reason, I still, like, as a fan, think about that. I don't think about where it didn't go. I think about what the possibilities were. So I don't know. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I was going to say, I think I should rewatch it with that mentality, because I want to comment on something else that Rob said. I was sitting down to rewatch this here at home just a week ago or whatever, preparing for this episode. And I put it into the Blu-ray player, and it started to play, and I was in the kitchen getting some drinks and some snacks, and the title crawl came, and it was like, and I, like, super loud. I was like, oh yeah, I'm watching Star Wars. And like immediately I perked up, like, I'm watching Star Wars. So, like, I 100% agree with that. And I also am curious how much would change if I would have had a chance to see this in a theater and be involved in the hype and the build up to it. Instead, I came and saw it as like, oh, I got to make sure that I see The Force Awakens before I see The Last Jedi. Like The Force Awakens so much wasn't The Force Awakens to me. It was like the prequel to The Last Jedi, if that makes sense, because just the way that being a missionary and not seeing it worked out. So I also think that revisiting it and my absolute frustration I have with the lack of a plan for the prequel trilogy makes me just infuriated by everything I see. Like when whatever the goggle lady's name is hands the lightsaber to Rey, and I think it's Han says, "Where did you get that?" She's like, "A great question for another time." And I was like, "But we never get the answer to that question." Like for a setup to a trilogy, if you had a plan, having JJ with his mystery box abilities direct this is like home run all the way. This is a grand slam for setting up a trilogy. And the fact that it doesn't work like bothers me while I'm watching it, because I imagine it could be so good. So I think rewatching as like a standalone thing might be a lot better. So I'll have to give that a try. Because I got to say, I meant to say this at the beginning, so I'll say it now. I think the best way to make a successful trilogy is to make one film really, really well. And then to make a second film really, really well and have the characters go through a continuation of progression, not just a reset, and then make another film, so on and so forth. Or the second best way is to have a plan over the course of 3 movies. Neither of those happened with this trilogy. Neither one. And it really bothers me. But I think if I could go and view it like this was their attempt to make a first film that was incredibly well made and was exciting for Star Wars fans, I think I might be more favored to it on rewatch. And I definitely will rewatch it because I love Star Wars so much and I love the beginning of this that much. So I appreciate the guidance to maybe help me enjoy it a little bit more.
Yeah, Rob, any thoughts on that? Because there's, again, I think there's a lot of great, if you can separate it, there's a lot of great mystery here that was like lacking from Star Wars. Is like, well, geez, like, what does this mean? Like, what does this mean? Like, how did Snoke rise to power? Like, why is he, what happened with, that opening scene with Kylo Ren, and just, yeah, especially when he stops the blaster bolt, it's like, ooh, here's a guy.
Yeah,
and
that's great intro too.
Why does he think that like Vader was so evil? Like what has happened? Like, why does he follow Vader and like, grandfather, I'm gonna finish what you started? Like, oh my God, there's so much mystery and intrigue, and like, what does this mean?
Just that frozen in space blaster bolt is among the coolest things they did at the beginning of this. It's really a shame for Harrison having not had the years in between films to really like have that philosophical in your head, like trying to figure things out. Just the debate around Rey's parentage, like who is she? It was something, there was a kind of a big deal made about her parents leaving her, and she was having these memories and these dreams of her parents leaving her. So everybody's asking the question, is she actually a Kenobi? Is she a Skywalker? Is she, is she related to Han somehow? Like, there was all of this, debate about who she actually was. And that dominated so much of this space. Who is Snoke? Where did he come from? Like, what is going on here? What caused Ren to actually turn? Like, what made Kylo Ren switch from, what you would have thought he was to what he became? There was so many of these questions. And yes, how did Maz get the lightsaber? There's so many great things that are brought up in that mystery. And for years, you get to kind of try to figure it out and hope that you get some of that paid off in The Last Jedi. I don't know. Maybe they'll make a show on Disney Plus that'll kind of fill in all the holes like they seem to be doing with The Mandalorian. They just Mandalorian's just out there with Spackle. He's just out there, just Din and Baby Yoda, just, spackling holes in the plot of Disney, of Star Wars films, just filling them in, figuring out ways to make it cohesive and make sense now. Maybe that's what they'll do. Who knows? Just give me more Baby Yoda. But there's so much that if you don't regard this movie in the same way that you do the rest of the trilogy, if you just think about it as a standalone film, it's a blast. It's a lot of fun. I think there's a lot of things. I think we would remember, and I said this on the other episode, we would remember The Phantom Menace better if Attack of the Clones wasn't a steaming turd pile. if it set up a better film. And I also think, to some extent, obviously, we know that there's a difference between critics and fans on The Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker is certainly a divisive film in terms of how people feel about it. People tend to have strong opinions about both of those movies. If those two films had really landed well and had a cohesive vision, I think we might be talking about, The Force Awakens as one of the best, like among the best, towards the very top in all of Star Wars. And I think we'd probably think of Phantom Menace a little bit better too.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's so many like interesting things, and I think there's so many like really good scenes. And one of, and again, they've done so much in other media now since this trilogy is done. You can find out what happened with Luke Saber in the comic books. Heck, you even find out what happened to his hand in the comic books.
I don't think I needed that. Like, did you need that? I don't think I needed that.
No, I mean, you certainly don't, but like you can find all of this stuff out by reading these comics. But also even I know one of the things that was like a huge problem, and I read the novel for The Force Awakens, and I read the novel for Rise of Skywalker. And like one of the things that I heard a lot of people complain about was like, how did Rey at the end get so powerful to like actually even fight Ren? Granted, he was shot by Chewie with the blaster, and I'd like to talk about that scene some more too. But one of the things that they like explain in the novel is they already start to explain like this dyad in the Force, that when Kylo was probing Rey's mind to try and find answers, she was actually taking some of the Force from him, and it was actually like transferring. So there's a lot that does get explained in the novelization of this movie that I know a lot of people complained about, and it's just like simple little things like, again, that are like maybe an extra 15 seconds would have done good. But again, like I love this movie, and there's a lot for me that's emotional here. Seeing Han and Leia together, certainly the ending, but I'll save that for a little bit later. But that I love that bridge scene with Kylo Ren and Han Solo, and I think about it in terms of Chewie too. Like, I know he just like fired off a shot, but I feel like that was so difficult for him because if you really think about it, Chewie's been with Han for like ever. When Star Wars, like forever, he's been with him. He watched Ben probably not like be born, but he was there when Ben was born and watched him grow up, and felt like a part of the family probably. And to see how he fell, and then to watch him kill his own father, and then like know that he's going against somebody that he considered family. For me, when you break it down, like there's a lot of emotion there. And that's why I think I like this movie so much, is there's a lot of behind the scenes emotion to this movie.
He's definitely Uncle Chewie. No doubt, right? Like that's how he functions in that family. And I think it's really fascinating to think about how he was side by side with Han through the original trilogy, fighting. They were doing their thing. They were spice runners, and then they start to work with the rebellion. They start to actively fight against the Empire and the dark side of the Force, and Darth Vader and and Emperor Palpatine, trying to stop them, and to watch his nephew basically turn to that path that he had spent a good deal of his life fighting, and watching people die beside him, and sacrificing for, and to see him turn to that, and then murder his brother basically right in front of him. It's a heartbreaking scene when you really pull the onion back and put yourself in Chewie's mind.
Yeah, Harrison, where do you stand on that?
I don't know how I could say it any more than that you two already have. It's uh, I agree. Yeah, I think that it's a great moment, especially. I'll save it for when we talk about the Rise of Skywalker, but just the journey that Kylo Ren goes through of one of the things that is the through line of goodness for the entire sequel trilogy. I think we can all agree that it's Kylo Ren and Adam Driver, and this was kind of the start of that strong through line of goodness and quality. And that is a great moment, particularly for Chewie. I do have a huge complaint, though, that later when they get off the ship and Han has died, Leia goes up and hugs Rey, and Chewie walks right past her. Like, what?
Yeah, that
Why?
was.
Why? I cannot remove that from my brain. And it's like, what? Leia would have hugged Chewie. She would have. So I don't know. But back to the actual scene with Han and Ben or Kylo, that is a great scene, and adds such a uniqueness to a character. It's almost like the exact foil of Luke Skywalker in Ben Solo, and it's really interesting, really exciting to see in Star Wars. And I think that's one of the reasons we all were so excited about this trilogy to come. Is like, whoa, who's this Kylo Ren dude? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of fans were like, why in the heck would she hug Ray? But like before Chewie, I know a lot of fans were like, I can't forgive that scene. And Abrams even like did an interview about that where he's like, yeah, I totally dropped the ball on that one. My bad.
The one thing I do really want to talk about, though, is for me, yeah, it was a heartbreaking scene because we all love the character of Han Solo, but this was after we hit this scene, it becomes obvious to us we're not getting a reunion of the Trinity. We're not getting Luke, Han, and Leia together. And that's when we found out they were all coming back for the movie. That's the only thing we wanted. We wanted those three on screen together. And, in terms of bigger picture topics about the sequel trilogy, the fact that we never got it, and we only got a little bit of Han and Leia and a little bit of Luke and Leia together, really could have made this better. I know they wanted to try to focus on new characters. I know they wanted to introduce new characters that could possibly carry Star Wars forward, especially when you consider the ages that the original three were getting to and will not be able to be available. It's a miss.
Yeah, it is a miss because that was just like the one thing that I was like, okay, like this has to happen. You have to have these three on. And there was like an original draft where Luke actually showed up to that scene when they're on the bridge. And that was his appearance. And they never quite clarified why they did not end up going with that cut, but that has been documented that was originally part of the script and then they changed it. But yeah, for everything that did and didn't happen with the trilogy, I really think that is the biggest, to me, that's like the biggest gaffe is how did you not think that you had to do that? And I guess for everything that I can just look the other way on, it is very hard for me to look the other way on the fact that you did not get those three on screen one more time. It's kind of like a little bit of a slap in the face, but we do get Luke at the end and it's very quick, but one thing that I remember seeing, in the theater and every time I see it, I don't know why. I am just like, when I first saw it, I was captivated by that island that he's on and just like, holy crap, this is gorgeous. Like, I remember for some reason just being so enthralled with that scene because it was just like gorgeously shot. And that location is just beautiful. And I know some people had a problem that it was like right at the end. I didn't have a problem with it. Rob, do you have a feeling on how Luke shows up in this movie? Were you disappointed by it? Is it more disappointing to look back now on it, or what's the deal?
So this is one where it's hard to look at the end of this film, the introduction of Luke Skywalker. Mark Hamill even makes a great joke about how hard it was to learn his lines for this movie. I forget what his exact line is, but it's quite witty. And Mark Hamill's actually hysterical. For people who don't know that he's actually wildly funny, he really is very clever. I think looking at what happens immediately after this scene takes place in the second film, and what we get of Luke's character in the second film, it's hard to look at originally there was all of this mystery around like what's going to happen now that she's found Luke. Is he going to be the new Obi-Wan? Is he going to take this young Jedi under his wing and teach her the ways of the Force? And now they're going to work together. They're going to try to turn Rey, or they're going to try to turn Ren. And then something very different happens next. So it's hard to watch this scene without really hating what's going to happen next for this character.
Harrison, because I know you don't hate what happens next. How do you view this?
It's weird because I can watch it with duality and be like, in fact, as I was rewatching The Force Awakens, I got to that scene. I was like, oh yeah, beautiful island. I got to agree. I love that island. I love the cinematography. I was like, here we go. This is the stuff that I'm really excited about. Like, yeah, now I'm getting to The Last Jedi, but also watching it knowing I understand why people hate this. Like, I don't hate it. I actually think it's great writing. I think it's one of the best things that's happened to Star Wars is what happens with Luke Skywalker. But I can watch it and understand and be like, okay, I do get why people are displeased with it, but I'm personally not.
I can hear Rob's heartbeat through the mic.
I'm sitting on my hands right now.
So yeah.
All right. I mean, does anybody have anything else that they want to just cap off The Force Awakens with before? I think it's time. We've teased Rob enough with, letting him come to his senses about The Last Jedi. So anybody, do you have anything that you want to cap off The Force Awakens with? Best scene in this movie before we move on?
I think for me, the best scene is the opening. I think that attack on there and seeing who our new villain is, seeing how powerful he is, the mystery of holy cow, these are stormtroopers. I thought we beat them at the end of the original trilogy. I thought the Resistance and I thought we had the New Republic. How is the Empire back in charge? And what's this First Order thing? It just looks like a rebranded Empire. I think just the mystery that kicked off with that opening scene was great for me.
Well, and the fact that stormtroopers could hit people.
Right. Yeah, we weren't aware they could do that.
Like, what the heck is this? They must have gotten an auto aim, but
finally.
Harrison, any last thoughts on The Force Awakens?
I think I just got to mention, I love the casting choices for these new characters. I think that's one of the things that's great about J.J. Abrams is he's great at finding talent that is kind of hidden and bring them into the light. And that's one of the best decisions you could make with new characters. Like, imagine how different this would be if Rey was played by like Jennifer Lawrence or something, like Oscar Isaac was kind of well known, but not like super popular. And I just love the casting choices. I think the actors do a phenomenal job. And I think it's one of the reasons that we can all kind of get behind. We love these characters is because of the actors.
Yeah, I think everybody did a really good job. I think that's something we can go into more in these other movies. But The Last Jedi. So
we're going to do this now, right? We're going to get into it.
We're going to get into it.
And here comes the heat.
So,
Rob, I'm prepared. I'm pulling up my notes.
So, all right. Here's what I will say, because I have talked to a lot of people. I have done a written review for this. I have done a podcast episode for this. And I say that this movie is 30 minutes away from being an absolute masterpiece. The 30 minutes is that stupid for me casino scene. But when I have talked to people, one thing that I always say is I can understand, just like Harrison said, where people are coming from. I can understand why they feel like that's not my Luke Skywalker. I can totally get that. And I always ask people, do you think that the ideas that were presented, because one of the things that happened in Force Awakens was everybody towards the end was like, it's a rehash of A New Hope, like nothing is new with Star Wars. And then you get this movie where I think there's a lot new for Star Wars. It explores concepts that haven't been talked about. And one of the things that I always ask, and then Harrison, I'll let you go first, and then Rob, I'm going to let it build up a little more. I'm going to let it fester.
Oh, man.
I'm letting it boil. I always ask, do you think the ideas presented in this movie would be better received if it wasn't with characters that people identify with on an emotional level? And I think sometimes that maybe clouds some judgment, because you think about Star Wars with emotion, and it's either this is my Star Wars or that's my Star Wars, or I don't think that they would ever do this. And I don't think Mark Hamill's interviews helped at all. He was very open about how he didn't care for this portrayal of Luke. And when somebody identifies so emotionally with that character, when the guy who is the character says, I don't agree with it, it's just a recipe for disaster. So, Harrison, as we let the temperature on Rob get hotter, even though you like this, do you think maybe that is a case where some of these ideas would be much better represented in a different Star Wars universe? Like, this is totally separate from the characters that people grew up with.
100%. 100%. I think that one of the questions I want to ask Rob is how he feels about Rian Johnson's other work, specifically Knives Out. Rian Johnson is an incredibly talented writer and director. And like I said in the part one of this Star Wars series, Rian Johnson is the only other person besides George Lucas who was given the opportunity to both write and direct Star Wars. You know, JJ, sure, he did writing, but there was other writers with him. And I totally understand where Rian Johnson taken the script, taken all the mystery boxes of JJ's first film, and the opportunity went the direction he did. Clearly, Rian Johnson was not interested in making a rehash of Star Wars. He was interested in new ideas. I don't think that was very smart for a continuation of the Skywalker saga. Now, if the sequel trilogy was just like a trilogy, you know, if it wasn't the continuation from episode 6, if it was like a brand new episode 1, 2, and 3, or whatever you want to call it, I think people would, and this Luke Skywalker wasn't Luke Skywalker, but was like John Moonrunner or whoever his name was. I think it would be a lot easier to get behind the ideas. And I hope that Rian Johnson still does get a Star Wars trilogy, because I think he makes great Star Wars. So yeah, I 100% agree that I think people would like this film a lot more if it wasn't part of the Skywalker saga. And I'll also add that I think it doesn't fit in the Skywalker saga really well. But I don't think the sequel trilogy does really well either. And so I just kind of like, well, of the mess of the sequel trilogy that we got, this is the best one. But the ideas, as much as I love them, I feel like they would have belonged a little bit better somewhere else.
Yeah. Rob, you know, this guy's got Godzilla flying spaceships and Johnny Moonwalker. So all right, go ahead, man. Like, here it is. You have been waiting.
Gloves are off. So a reoccurring segment on Matt Goes to the Movies is Rob ruined something, and I'm going to ruin The Last Jedi. So, and I'm going to ruin Harrison trying to ruin me ruining The Last Jedi. So, so here we go. Matt did cover this film by itself when he initially started this show about a year ago now. And a direct quote from Matt's review of The Last Jedi. This movie is almost as close to a grand slam as you can be, which is really amazing because every word of what you just said was wrong. We have Luke, the original hero, and they make him out to be the Big Lebowski of Star Wars. He's just a loser, kicking around, not doing anything in life. You just swap out the White Russians for the green elephant milk, and he's the Big Lebowski of Star Wars. And yes, I'm fully acknowledging I have too much of an emotional investment in Luke Skywalker. And I agree 100%. If these ideas were presented with somebody else, not Luke Skywalker, we probably would have accepted this character a little bit more. But here's the problem, is that there's things that he does that are not true to his character and look, these are just my thoughts and my beliefs. So do we really believe Luke, the eternal optimist, who was the only sentient creature in the entire galaxy that thought Darth effing Vader could be redeemed, would even for a fraction of a second consider murdering a child? Like that's the event that kicks all of this into motion, is he kicks the lightsaber on for just that fraction of a second. Ben wakes up, sees him, and that kicks all of these things off. Luke believed so strongly that there was light left in his father Anakin, that he could redeem him from being Darth Vader, bring him back as Anakin Skywalker. There was not anybody. He didn't share this plan with anybody because they would have told him he was an idiot. And there was no reason to believe that. He did. And that's the only way that he was able to make it work. That's the only way he was able to save the rebellion and save his friends, save his life. And to think that now he sees this darkness, this fraction of darkness in Ben, and he kicks his lightsaber on, to me, doesn't hold up with the character that we saw at the end of Return of the Jedi. And at this point of his life, he has so little left to care about. So when he tells the story originally to Rey, he lies about it. He tells her half the story. And then Kylo Ren tells her the other half of it. She comes back to him, and now we hear a third version of this story of what actually did happen. Why didn't he start with that? What has he got left to lose? He's never met this girl before in his life. What does he hope to gain by not just explaining it? Like, he's already a hermit living with some, like, elephant nuns or whatever they are. Like, what's he got left to lose? He's cut himself off from the Force. He's just living out his days in misery. There's no reason for him to lie. So to me, it's just poor writing, really. And the whole plot of this film has holes in it the size of both Death Stars side by side. There's so much of this that just doesn't make sense when you start asking questions. And I'm going to give you some examples. One of the major plots of this, when Leia, first of all, she gets sucked out into space and then just Mary Poppins her way right back in. Like, there was no setup to it. We just see her sucked out into space. We have this reaction to it. And then all of a sudden we're like, okay, well, they're just not going to do that, right? Like, you guys, they're not just going to kill Leia off like this. Somehow she's going to get saved, right? And then she just kind of scoots her way in, and there's no setup to it. There's no reference to it later that I guess she's a Force user too. Like, it just felt unearned. It was a very bizarre scene for me. But so she gets pulled back in. She's in this medical ward. They have Vice Admiral Holdo assumes control, and they don't feel like they can tell the plan to the whole crew. Like, what was the benefit of keeping the plan a secret? There's no discussion at any point that they have spies or traitors amongst them. It only exists to set up this lame mutiny plot later. That's the reason they didn't tell. Like, listen, these people are sacrificing and willing to put their lives on the line. They have a right to know what the plan is. So she doesn't share it at all, and it only exists just to make the mutiny thing happen later. And to me, it's poor writing. And when they present when Poe and Finn and Rose present the plan later, why exactly for them to go get this code breaker? What have they got to lose? They're sending 2 people and a droid. Neither of these 2 people are of any real need to the Resistance at that point. Like Finn really, like, he doesn't do much. He's not needed for anything they're trying to do. Rose is just zapping dudes and tasing them that are trying to use the escape pods. They could have literally anybody do that. You could have a droid do that. So what have they got to lose? They need 1 ship, 2 people, and they send them off. Like, to me, that whole thing, it just feels like forced. It's bad writing causing forced tension that doesn't really hold up. Then not having redundancies for the hyperdrive tracker seems like dumb and lazy writing to me. I'm going to pause there because I've got some other stuff, but I'll pause there and let you guys tell me why I'm wrong.
Go ahead, Harrison. You go first.
Oh, this is a tall order, but I will say that I by no means is this demeaning to Rob or anybody who doesn't like The Last Jedi, but I was just about prepared to hear everything that you just said because I've heard it so many other times. And that's what I think is really interesting is that on both sides of the camp of like or dislike The Last Jedi, the reasons seem to be the same for just about everybody. On the dislike, this isn't my Luke Skywalker plot holes in the plot type of thing. If I'm really summarizing it, on the like side, it's kind of like this is really new and exciting Star Wars. We really like it. It's great ideas. We like the characters type of thing. If I'm really watering down everything, and this is what I have to say. I joked at the beginning that I was going to change Rob's mind, and I completely knew that I wasn't going to. Like I just knew that I wasn't. But I like to joke about it, because that's what we do. We joke about The Last Jedi. And this is what I'll say. Do I have problems with some of these plot holes, as Rob called them? Yeah, the scene with Leia, I don't like. I don't think it's horrible. I don't think it's bad writing. I think that that Rian Johnson was not interested in the old characters. He wasn't. He was really interested in these new characters. And it seemed like a necessary way to get Leia out of the way. And I don't like how it was done. So I'm not a huge fan of that scene. It's just kind of like, okay, it was what it is. There's, we could sit here and poke holes through all of Star Wars. It's all Swiss cheese. It's just kind of how emotional you are about those holes. And so other things about, with Holdo, I'll talk about that first. Well, actually, let me say this first in response. When I went to go see this, I saw it in theaters. I saw it with my brother and some friends. We walked out of the movie theater, and I was like, man, this is some of the best Star Wars I've ever seen. And my brother and I immediately started talking. He's like, I hated it. like immediately. It like immediately changed my opinion. And I remember I said back to him kind of insecurely, I was like, you know what? I think it's a great movie. It's just bad Star Wars. And we kind of agreed on that. And then I rewatched and I was like, what was I saying? This is great Star Wars. And so it's weird that like I can, so anyways, so back to Holdo. I think that being someone who has to respond in following up Leia, helping the Resistance understand that you're not as in a desperate situation as it really appears you are, maintaining hope for people and leading people, and also trying to figure out how in the world is the First Order tracking us through light speed. No one's done that before. Like, that's a tough situation that I don't envy being in at all. I don't want to follow up Leia. I don't want to try and give people hope when it really seems like we're all about to die. We're just hanging on as long as we can. And how the heck are they tracking us through light speed? No one's done that before. So I can understand her leadership decisions. Like, I'm not going to tell you because you would disobey a direct order to begin with. Like, Poe was the reason that the entire bomb squad died. He obeyed a direct order. He turned off his radio or communicator, whatever it was, to attack a dreadnought ship, which did nothing except for lose a bunch of lives. I wouldn't trust Poe at that point. I wouldn't trust anybody. I would not even trust myself if I was Holdo. So I totally understand that. I think the mutiny scene is great writing for the character of Poe and how he becomes a leader and not just a hero. I think that the Canto Bight scene has its flaws. I do have a problem with a lot of it, but I am excited for what it does with the character of Finn. Like Finn was a super interesting character, is that he's like the first stormtrooper who's turned against I shouldn't say the first, but in the mainstream Skywalker saga, he's the first stormtrooper that's turned against the dark side and gone the other way, so to speak. And he goes from that to being the guy in the movie who just yells Rey. Like that's all he does in The Force Awakens is, where's Rey? The movie starts with him waking up, and the first thing he says, where's Rey? That's literally the first line out of his mouth. And I think the Canto Bight scene and what follows afterwards on Crate is great characterization and great progression for him that's totally lost in Rise of Skywalker, and he goes back to Rey! And it's just like, oh, come on. Like, this guy had great opportunities to become something. So do I have problems with some of these moments in Rise or in The Last Jedi? Yeah, I don't think that they were handled perfectly. I don't think The Last Jedi is a perfect movie. I think it is the strongest of the entire sequel trilogy, and I think the ideas presented are super interesting. And I'll respond, and I really am curious what Rob thinks. I'm sorry I've been talking for a while, but I love The Last Jedi in that, and this is why I think it doesn't fit the Skywalker saga. Rey from nowhere is the most exciting thing that's happened for me in Star Wars personally, because I'm not a Skywalker. I don't feel like I belong to any particularly powerful bloodline, and that was a moment where I was like, I can be a Jedi that is powerful the same way that Luke Skywalker can, and I think that that's like incredibly meaningful, and I think that Broom Boy is really exciting. Like, if you're going to count on anybody to be powerful with the Force, count on the people who have to defend themselves from a young age. I think it's just incredible writing in what it means for Rey from nowhere. Granted, that was dropped later, and we'll talk about that. So, but that doesn't fit in the Skywalker saga. Like, you're telling the story of the Skywalkers. Rey should not be Rey from nowhere, and so it's like this weird duality where it's like, I really love this, but it doesn't fit. But granted, the sequel trilogy is just kind of a mess. So I'm like just kind of grateful that we got this, because nothing really worked out the best. Like, nothing's blatantly horrible, but things didn't work out the best. So it's weird that I feel like I'm like in the middle. I'm like trying to like cover both sides of the argument, which probably isn't going very well either way.
So I kind of want to just first I want to talk about Luke and why I think that Luke is believable in this and why he would shut himself off, because, okay, here's a guy who his whole life wanted something more. He wanted something different. He wanted to leave Tatooine. He does. Ben dies, but he finds strength and he does what nobody probably thought was possible. He bests the Emperor. He saves Vader for a brief period of time. He has his best friend Han. He has his sister Leia. They have their son Ben, and they trust him to train him. And in his, again, Rob, maybe the execution is not right as to why he would fear that. I can forgive that, because I think and maybe it's hard to, but he feels like he fails Ben, and the one person that he was trusted to protect and to train, he fails. And how did he do all of this work for Ben to get seduced by Snoke, to idolize not Anakin Skywalker, who he was able to save at the end, but he has this fantasy in his head about what Darth Vader was and how he has to finish his work. After everything he's done, he failed. And I think, Rob, you mentioned it in part one of the lines that he says, and he quote says, and I love this line. So I just, oh God, I love it. When he's teaching Rey lessons, he says, lesson number 2 is, now that they're extinct, the Jedi are romanticized, deified. But if you strip away the myth and look at their deeds, the legacy of the Jedi is failure, hypocrisy, and hubris. And then he says, and this is what you were talking about, Rob, at the height of their powers, they allowed Darth Sidious to rise, create the Empire, and wipe them out. It was a Jedi Master who was responsible for the training and creation of Darth Vader. And she does say it was a Jedi who saved him. But again, he says, like, and I became a legend. For many years there was balance, and then I saw Ben, my nephew with the mighty Skywalker blood. And in my hubris, I thought I could train him past my strength. Han was Han about it, but Leia trusted me with her son. Um, to me, that is terrible. He understands that Han is Han, but he says Leia trusted me. And he thinks that he failed her, which is very hard for him to accept. And I think the ideas that they present in this movie where he says, like, I came to this island to die. It's time for the Jedi to end. And he says, you're telling me that if the Jedi go extinct, all light is lost. Like, do you see how vain that sounds for the Jedi to think that? I think this Star Wars, this Last Jedi presents such an interesting concept. And even Kylo Ren says it. Like, I don't want to be the light side. I don't want to be the dark side. Like, he asked Rey, like, it's time for all of that nonsense to end. Like, how do you think either side? There needs to be something more. And I think that's a hugely interesting concept to explore. And I think there is room for that, but I understand why somebody might think it doesn't fit or why they don't want it to fit with this.
That's all really compelling stuff. I think some of the direct quotes that you reference are some of the scenes that actually really work. For as often, for as many appearances as I've made on your show, Matt, and as many times as we've worked the Last Jedi reference into literally any movie or TV show we're talking about, and as much as I bag on it as not being a good film, and my overall dislike for it, I will absolutely recognize where there are parts that work. And I think you've highlighted one of the scenes that actually really does. I think Harrison referenced another scene for me that I think is one of my favorite aspects of The Last Jedi, which is Rey being nobody. When you think about, and I talked about this in the lead up, when we finished up Force Awakens, but we've got all this time until Last Jedi. Who is Rey? What is her, who's her family? Where did she come from? It was such a major discussion amongst fans trying to figure it out and theorize. And it was years that people spent trying to do this. And then it just casually is like, yeah, your parents were junkies. They were nobodies. They sold you for drugs and left, and they're dead in the sand. Like, to me, it was such a gut punch, and it was like, it wasn't what I was expecting at all. I mean, nobody was putting that theory out there, and it completely went another direction. I really like that part of this. And I think some of what Luke, I think a large part of that is Mark Hamill just really crushes that scene. Getting back to something you were talking about, though, with his critique of how the character was presented, I don't always think the actor knows everything there is to know about what's best for an entertainment value of how their character is being presented. But I'm going to give Mark Hamill the benefit of the doubt. He's had this character in his head on again, off again for 40 years. If he feels strongly about it, I'm going to listen to him. I'm going to definitely listen to him, how he feels about his character. And certainly it's I have those same opinions, regardless of if he liked how his character was presented or not. I still kind of feel the way that I do about it. I have a couple more things. We'd kind of talked about the casino scene. It is largely regarded. I mean, this should have been on the cutting room floor. It doesn't add a lot. I do like the kids, and the hope you see with them, and the kid, kind of grabbing the broomstick using the Force, although it's never followed up on. I sort of like that, but I want to present to you one of the we've talked about it, that Finn really doesn't get character development in an overly meaningful way, and certainly. John Boyega's talked about this a lot, that he was very disappointed with it. He even made it seem as though he felt that there was racism behind the fact that his character was not really presented or developed properly. And it's like, John, I don't know how to tell you this, bud, but characters not being developed properly, that's just how Star Wars works sometimes, bud. That's just how it is, man. There's plenty of characters that don't get developed very well. Instead of this casino scene, what if we had something where we did see true growth out of Finn? We got a chance to learn more about him. I don't really think we do in this scene. He has a little bit of fun, and they're in a little bit of peril, and they get out of it. And largely, the thing that starts this whole thing is, our heroes are getting chased because of basically what's the equivalent of a parking at a handicap spot. That's kind of what gets them, the boys in blue onto them and starts their whole escape. It's just, for as much as I said somebody needed to get a red pen with George Lucas and go through, hey man, these prequels, you should think about cutting some of this or reworking some of this. I definitely think some of that should have happened here. Definitely the casino scene doesn't work. And I want to talk about the hyperdrive jump. If that works, why is this not a common battle tactic? Like her grand sacrifice at the end where she makes the jump into light speed and just basically plows right through, the capital ship. Why don't they do that all the time? And on top of that, why didn't they do that sooner? Because they had some of their fleet was slowly running out of fuel and getting exploded. Why didn't they just pick the first one that was running out of fuel, turn that sucker around, jump into light speed, and the rest of the fleet would have been able to get away? There's just little things like that. And even something as simple as the poor rotisserie, that's kind of unsettling, right? Like Chewie's going to snack down on this thing, and there's all these cute little porgs with their big eyes kind of looking at him like, hey, that's my brother. Hey, that's my friend you're about to eat. And it's really unsettling to me. It's supposed to be played for laughs. I don't find it funny. I think it's kind of cringy.
Very interesting. I'd like to follow up on a couple of the things that you just talked about. So one of those is definitely the character development of Finn, or lack thereof. What I feel that Finn would have had proper character development. I really think that Finn sacrificing himself at the end of this, I feel like that would have been earned, actually. And I feel like Rose coming in at the end and like pushing him out of the way with her ship to save him, I didn't like that at all, because I thought it was actually pretty fitting. I thought he made a choice that made sense for his character, and I thought that was taken away from him. And certainly it seems that I think he has a little bit more to do in Rise of Skywalker, but I feel like it might have been I feel like it would have been fitting for his character based on things that we saw. But again, it's so hard to look at some of this stuff and say, well, this is why it doesn't work, or this is why it does work, because again, when you get to Rise of Skywalker, it feels like it just actively acts like a sequel to The Force Awakens in some parts, and then it in some parts acts like it wants to actually acknowledge The Last Jedi. There's a huge flip-flop in between it, which is my biggest problem.
You're 100% correct about the Finn death. I want to talk about something that happens at the end of it. And I agree. I don't really like it because it doesn't make sense. Either in the next film, Finn should have had something interesting to do. We should have learned more about him. We should have seen some kind of growth from him, or they should have just let him be cannon fodder. It would have just been a much better use of his character, and I think we would remember his character better.
Yeah, I mean, Harrison, a lot, I said a lot in between, and Rob followed up. Where do you stand on Finn? I mean, even maybe like Rose. I mean, let's not forget too that, and I hate this. We talked about this in Captain America and the Winter Soldier. Just the absolute hate that she got, and I hate that part. Because again, like you're doing what you were given, like you're working with the material. I don't think she was all that interesting in this movie. So I hope that her being cut from The Rise of Skywalker, what I don't know what the right reason would be. I didn't find her interesting. I hate the fact that she got so much just negativity. I think it's despicable. But looking at it outside of that and just looking at her in this movie, not the actress, the part that she played, I didn't find anything particularly interesting about that character. In relation to like her with Finn, and what she brought to the table.
I think I just have to comment about this because it makes me so sad. I think it's really sad that like one of the first Asian female characters we get in Star Wars is literally like booed off the screen by hatred. Like that's just so sad to me. Like, what does that say about us as Star Wars fans? Like, holy smokes! But on the character of Rose, and well, first let me talk about the character Finn because I was under the same impression that I thought the Canto Bight scene, that casino scene, was kind of weak. You know, that was the weakest part of the entire film until I rewatched it in preparation for this, and I was like, wow, it's not the strongest part. I'm not swinging to the other side of the pendulum here, but it's not as weak as I thought it was. I actually think that it's one of the few moments of character development that Finn actually gets outside of anything else. Could it have been done better? Could he have gotten more development? Definitely. Learning a little bit more about him and why he chose to run away from the First Order, which is not an easy thing to do, that would have been interesting to learn about. But this character development we get here is better than anything else I can remember for him. The rest of the time, he's just asking, "Where's Rey?" To my memory, and I think that I love that we see the complexity of what Finn is going through. He's left the First Order because he felt like what they were doing was wrong, and he ran until he ran into a girl, and then he just kind of swooned for her, and that's why he stuck around. And then he kind of got invested in the Resistance and saw that it was a good thing, and then he stuck around because he thought he was on the good side, to then be confronted like, well, what really is the good side in war? And I don't have any answer to that question, but I think it's an interesting idea conflict for Finn to have, as he's been the flip-flopper trying to find the right side of anything. I think it's an interesting experience he has to experience what I think a lot of us can agree is the corrupt warmongers making all the money and gambling it to see kind of a true face of evil, if you will. But so I like that scene, but it does get a little bit weak. I think it's drawn out way too long. I think the idea that the police are after them because they parked on the beach is the dumbest thing ever. Like, they're on a stealth mission. Why didn't they park like in that grassy field that the horses were running through later? Like, why on the beach? This is the dumbest thing ever. So there's a lot about it that I don't like, but getting to the part where we're on Crate and they're on those skimmers or whatever they're called, and Finn is sacrificing himself. I think that's a great character arc of Finn to leave the First Order and then swoon for a girl, then to choose to stick around for the Resistance because he thinks it's good, then to have those morals challenged by this grayness and by this very interesting character, whatever his name is, DJ I think is his name, to then firmly make a decision to stick with the Resistance, I think is an incredible character development. He was choosing in that moment to give his life for the Resistance. What more can you give for something? What more can you give for a cause? Now, that was taken away from him, and I think rightfully so. He wasn't going to do anything. His little skimmer thing that was already falling apart was not going to stop that thing from blowing down everything he cared about, and his life would have been for nothing. And so I appreciate Rose saving him, because it would have been a waste of an individual, frankly. And but as far as the character Rose, it kind of just seems like she has interesting potential, right? She's one of those characters that gets swept up into the rebellion or the Resistance, whatever R word we want to name it. She's swept up into the fight for good, and it kind of tags along as being somebody who kind of just starts out of nowhere into having further potential. But the potential is not reached. It's just kind of like, well, she could be interesting, but it's not quite there. So hopefully,
Yeah, I think so. One thing, and now we're going back because we haven't talked about this. And we talk about character development over the three movies. And Harrison, you said Kylo Ren is probably the best representation of character development across three movies. And I would agree with that. And I think a lot of people do, from one movie to the next in succession. And one of the things that I really like, and this will come up later in Rise of Skywalker, is I really like the scene with Snoke when they're in the throne room and he's just basically berating Kylo Ren about failing to a girl. And, I saw in you what all masters look for. And I just think it's like great. Like, he even calls him like a new Vader, and that's amazing with the music playing. It's just, oh my God, it was so great. But then he just talks about how he thinks he's wrong because he was bested by a girl who never held a lightsaber. Like, even yells at him to like take off that helmet. Like, you're just a boy parading around in a mask. I think that's awesome. And how when he decides that he's going to be his own person and he smashes that helmet and he's not trying, to kind of be in Vader's shadow. I think that is amazing stuff. I really like that scene, and I really like how he eventually talks to Rey too when they have their interactions, when you find out they're a dyad in the Force. I think those scenes are fantastic. I think it's really great use of the Force where they can pull things through, and you get that later in Rise of Skywalker, more so. But I love that. I love that character development for Kylo Ren. I love when he reaches his hand out to Rey. It comes from a scene that, upon first watch, it's good. Rob, I'll totally agree with you. Everything else that I will defend about The Last Jedi, when you stop and you watch it, the throne scene is garbage because all you'd have to do is take 3 seconds and see that at any given moment, one of those troopers should have sliced them in half. And they're clearly waiting for them to like turn around. It is, watching it back, I don't think it's well shot at all because it just shows where you're filming a scene and it doesn't feel like a real battle because you can clearly see people waiting for another person to get into place.
The Red Room scene, it's just a bunch of dudes in red armor standing around waiting to get their asses kicked. That's all it is. It's lousy choreography. It's lousy editing, lousy cinematography. This was wanting to show a big scene. The camera's pulled back. It was wanting you to see action happening when it needed to be pulled in tight, cover up some of the outside stuff. You see guys take big steps and spins away from the action to try to pull themselves away, but it's terrible. The first time I saw it, I immediately thought it was terrible. Every time I've rewatched it, I actually hate the scene more and more.
Harrison, if you like this is one thing that I've sat on Rob's side.
I may be alone on.
Yeah, I've switched from the sofa to the love seat here. For this
is what I'll say. This is what I'll say. That scene is filled with great intention and executed very poorly. In the theater, watching it, I was like probably the most annoying person in the theater because I was so excited. Like, emotionally for the first time, that's such a great scene. But on rewatch, you see it's called pumping. You see the stunt people, whoever they are in those red suits, just like spinning their arms, to like make it look like they're doing something when they're absolutely not. Not well directed, which is a bummer. The fight choreography, that would have been sweet to have like really cool fight choreography
because that's like the one lightsaber fight. I mean, we have the one later with Kylo and Luke, but that's like the one lightsaber fight in The Last Jedi, which is great on first visit when you've never seen it before. But now that you've seen it before and you're paying attention to other scenes besides just like the raw emotion of it, there's a lot of it's just very poor, sadly, because that what that scene could have been would have been great. I think the idea behind it of the two of them working together is really, really exciting, and it's just so sad that that specific scene is the one that's executed so poorly.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's great intention with poor execution. Rob, I'm going to pose this to you first because I'd like to talk a little bit more about Luke, but and why I think a lot of this works for his character. But I really thought, minus the beginning where he chucks the lightsaber, I do understand like the whole just what was that. I thought he actually had some pretty funny moments in this movie. And I wonder how you feel about those, particularly like when he first sees Rey and he's like, "Why are you here?" And he, she says like, "Where are you from?" And she says, "Nowhere." And he's like, "No one's from nowhere." And she says, "Jakku." All right, that's pretty much nowhere. Or when he's like, "Do you feel it? Reach out. That's the Force." And he like smacks her. Like, I thought that worked. Like, I thought that was actually well-placed humor. Like him just being, you're ridiculous. You think you know like things about the Force and what it is, but like the way he explains it to her, I thought was fantastic. But I thought he had some well-placed humor in this as well.
I'm not going to disagree with any of that. Again, I'm willing. I take shots of this movie as often as I can. That being said, I'm very objective about things too, and the things that I do think work, I've got no problem. I don't feel like I have to defend this being a terrible movie by saying every single second of this movie is terrible, because it's not. Most of the parts that really work well involve Luke. Every scene you referenced is fantastic. His line that I borrowed to describe your joy for this film of every single word you just said was wrong is great. Like he uses it twice. And it's pretty funny both times, really. When he's kind of messing with Rey a little bit, it's hard to tell if he's seriously trying to train her or if he's trying to dissuade her from continuing and just leave him alone. It's very interesting when you get past the green milk mustache. There's some interesting things that happen on the island with him. I have a little bit of a beef with some of the ways that the Force is used. I want to actually stop back for just 1 second. That when he's talking to her about how the Force works, can we just superimpose that dialogue over Qui-Gon's explanation with midichlorians? Can we just eliminate the whole midichlorians thing and take Luke's explanation of it? Because holy cow, that is way better. That's my headcanon. That's where midichlorians is banished from ever being thought of again. But the way that the Force is used in this film in several places where we've never really, I don't think we truly get limits on what the Force can and can't do. But man, it just seems like every time they need something, they just, the Force works that way now. Like, the Force lets you just kind of Mary Poppins your way out of outer space. And the Force lets you do astral projections too. Like that's Force. You can do that. The Force lets you call down lightning when you're a Force ghost. Like you can totally do that too, you guys. Like it just seems like when something comes up in the story and they just need a way to move forward, they just let the Force do it. I actually, that being said, with the dyad and the Force and and Ben and Rey being able to talk through the Force Time app, being able to have that video chat with each other, I actually it's almost a little bit unsettling because it's so weird. Like it just comes out of nowhere. We've never seen it before, and I want to not like it, but I kind of do.
Oh, See, his armor's already cracking, Harrison. Keep going.
No, I've always felt that way about it, though.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I really do. I like the fact that it's different. And again, like maybe because we're not used to it in this character, like with these characters on screen. But Harrison, what are your thoughts on it? I think you like how the Force is portrayed in this movie. I'm assuming.
Oh, I think it's great. In response to Rob, I hope this isn't taken rudely. I think that the Force has always been a MacGuffin, or not a MacGuffin, has always been like a Deus Ex Machina. Like I think of Luke on Cloud City after he fights Vader, and he like falls through the dump shaft or whatever, and he's like hanging on that thing with one hand, and he's like, Leia, like it's always just kind of been written as like, you need a way out. Well, here's a Force, which I think is great, and I do love the connection between Kylo and Rey. I think it's incredibly interesting to see two characters that are clearly in like deep opposition to one another, while also not being that way, having like a forced connection, like not just force as in like the Star Wars Force, like forced. Like the first time they have their Force Skype phone call or whatever you want to call it, Rey just immediately starts like yelling at Kylo like, "You're a murderer," and like just loses at him, and he's like, "How are you doing this? Can you see my surroundings? I can't see yours." Like he's way more interested in how it functions, and I think it's hilarious.
Right.
Clearly they're not the ones choosing it at the beginning, and I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly too, like for the ending, they certainly foreshadow what's going to happen, because he like literally says like you can't be doing this on your own. Like it would kill you.
Yeah.
And looking back, it's like, well, that's they certainly kind of gave you some breadcrumbs there. But one other thing that I really love about this movie, and I felt it from the beginning, but on every rewatch that I've had, I think there really is with this movie, there's some like just major emotional moments. One that's missed out on, and it's a deleted scene, and it's literally 2 minutes, is when, and backtracking, so sorry, when Rey first gets there, and Chewie breaks in the door, and he's like, "Chewie, what are you doing here?" And he's like, "Wait a minute, where's Han?" And then he goes, it's a deleted scene, and Luke goes into his hut, and it's almost like you can see him almost like opening himself up for a minute to the Force, and realizing, like really feeling the weight of like Han being gone. And again, like a huge missed opportunity to not get all three of them on screen together. But that was one thing I think they missed, was I don't know why that scene wasn't allowed to stay in the movie, just to show him like really taking a second to be like, oh my God, he's gone and I wasn't there. But I think there's just a lot of actually really good emotion when, Harrison, you just kind of mentioned it, when she just like flips out on him and she's like, "You're a monster." And he's like, "I didn't hate my father." And she's like, "Well, like, how could you kill him?" And he's just like, "Well, you're searching for a father in everybody, and, let the past go, kill it if you have to." There's just to me, there's so much emotion between these two characters in their scenes. And then there's so much emotion in Luke, like when he sees them talking, and he's just like, "Stop and like get off this island." Again, like I can see why Luke just turns himself off to everything, because like, Rob, I know you said some of it you agree, but like, again, to me, like this just perfectly summarizes why he could feel that way. Here's a quick spoiler. First time I'm ever using notes for this.
Wow.
Because I can't remember it exactly, but I feel like I don't want to butcher it. So right after he sees them talking, and he says, like, he finally tells her the same, like the whole story is, he says, sorry, I quote, I saw darkness. I sense it building in him. I'd seen it in moments during his training, but I looked inside and it was beyond what I imagined. Snoke had already turned him, and he would bring destruction, pain, and death in the end of everything I love because of what he will become. And for the briefest moment of pure instinct, I thought I could stop it. It passed like a fleeting shadow, and I was left with shame and consequence. And the last thing I saw were the eyes of a frightened boy whose master had failed him. I think that just, again, like it, to me, it perfectly summarizes why Luke is now done. He shut himself off. He failed his sister. He failed Kylo. He went against what he was supposed to think as a Jedi, and really, for a brief second, really thought about, I need to end him because, okay, I eventually saved my father. And I think about this as like a long-term thing, but like, he was arrogant and thought he could train him. And it's much like Obi-Wan said, like, I failed Anakin. But I feel like it all, when you look at it as a whole, explains why Luke is shut off. I think there's a lot of things that make sense about it because he realized what's the word I want to use here? I can't think of it, but just how like wrong and skewed the Jedi view is, and how it can turn somebody to the dark side when you tell them, like, there's so much that you're not supposed to do when you're a Jedi. Like, literally, be a robot. Like, everything leads to the dark side. I just think there's so many examples of why Luke would be in this position.
I agree. I think it. And go ahead, Rob.
I think there, for people who look at this film and view it the way that Matt I think, described very well, a perfectly acceptable defense for this film. If you believe that this is a good movie, I think you nailed the reasons why a person would think this is a good movie. I think when it really comes right down to it, this is not the movie we wanted, though. This is not the Luke Skywalker we wanted. We wanted Luke the hero. We wanted Luke as the savior. We wanted him to have a very specific reason why he had run off. That wasn't him becoming a shell of himself and giving up. And I guess to me, while I understand a lot of what you said, it feels out of character for me. It feels out of character to me for Luke to just give up. I give up. I can't, I can't serve anybody. I can't take care of anybody. I can't save anybody. Guess there's nothing left to do but live in a van down by the river. Like it doesn't really feel like what I think he would do. I think there's, the first Star Wars movie is called A New Hope. He's the new hope. And for that to just go away and for him not to stick around and try to clean up his mess, because that's what happened. When Ben turns into Kylo Ren and starts creating these things, and by the way, I guess one of the things that I really think the sequel trilogy kind of missed out on was giving us a real reason why the New Republic failed and the Empire surged back as the First Order. I don't really feel like for a lot of people that's explained very well. And I think really more than anything, as a leader of the Resistance and certainly somebody who would have been seen as a leader in the New Republic, and the head of the new Jedi Council, Luke could have probably done a better job of getting the PR out there to your average galactic citizen that the Empire was pretty awful and pretty terrible. And they did some really awful stuff, you guys. Like, don't support them if they try to surge back. Like, here's all the stuff that you missed out on that they covered up while they were in power. Like, you should probably know about this. Like,
and they don't have a dental plan.
No dental plan. But if you need your trachea crushed, come on down. They really did a terrible job of making the average galactic person understand how much worse they were to allow the First Order to come back. Like, that's one thing, and we haven't really talked about this much, but I never really fully bought into that it made sense that this First Order just came out of nowhere.
Harrison, I'll pose one other thing that's kind of funny because there was like a meme about it where in The Force Awakens, we're talking about The Last Jedi, but we didn't talk about this where once again, everything about the Jedi is kind of a myth. Like, wait, Luke Skywalker, I thought he was and Han's like, it's, somebody who didn't believe in the Force in the original. He's like, it's real, all of it. Like out of nowhere, once again, like nobody knows about it. And then by the time we get to Rise of Skywalker, and again, no roadmap, but it's like, oh, we know who Lando Calrissian is. We know this, we know that. But like 1 year ago, I was completely in the dark about everything. Like, there is like a gap of like, how did this just rise up under everybody's noses? But Harrison, I'll let you go from that.
Yeah, I one of my biggest complaints about the sequel trilogy is like, it's particularly with The Force Awakens, is like, well, we need the bad guys, so let's just bring back a different version of the Empire, and we're not going to explain how they rose to power. Like, it's the dumbest writing choice ever. How did they come back? I think it would have been way more interesting to get like a First Order, genuinely like a group of individuals beyond kind of what the Separatists were, where they were secret. It was almost like a forbidden group. I think that'd be way more interesting, but it's not. They're just a replacement of the Empire, and they just come out of nowhere and suddenly have all the power.
They didn't even bother to change the uniforms.
Right.
Exactly.
So movie idea, we'll start writing it, The First Order, a Star Wars story.
Sure.
To me.
So Harrison, I'll get your thoughts on this first. Rob, we mentioned, especially for us, and Harrison, I don't remember, so correct me if I'm wrong, if you really dug deep into this. Rob and I said one of the things that's like completely unforgivable was not getting the 3 original, especially for us, because like that's what we grew up on, and like, oh my God, like this is like, wow, these 3 are so amazing. Not getting the 3 together, but even though it's very brief, like again, like looking at my notes and the exact quote when towards the end of the movie, Luke comes to Leia, like my eyes kind of well up right now thinking about just those two being on screen together. And I think even though it's like super brief, God, I love that scene. It hits really, really hard for me for some reason. Like even reading their dialogue is like super emotional for me. I love it, but not like growing up with Luke and Leia. Like, does that scene hit you in any way? And maybe it's different for Rob, but like, how does that scene hit you?
I actually really enjoyed. I don't think that I hold the same weight to it that others do. I mean, I remember after The Last Jedi came out and The Rise of Skywalker was about to come out, I was getting tickets and I was talking to a coworker who's older, closer to your guys' age, and grew up with the original trilogy, was saying like, oh, I think one of the biggest mistakes with the sequel trilogy is not getting the 3 of them together. And that was the first time that I'd ever thought about that, is when he told me. So clearly I don't hold the same weight to it. But that aside, when they are together for the first time on screen together, there's something that just feels naturally special about it. And I think that anybody who's a fan of Star Wars is going to embrace that and be really grateful for it. And I think their interaction is really sweet. It does feel like a brother and sister who haven't seen each other in a while. It just feels really, really sweet. Like, I think the first thing Leia says is like, oh, I know what you're going to say. I changed my hair or something like that. Like,
yeah, that's exactly it.
It feels extremely sweet and well done.
Rob, how does that scene hit you? Especially too, because I don't know if it, when they might have seen each other after. But, one of the things is he's just, his line is no one's ever really gone. And he sits there and like, kisses her on her forehead and then leaves as he's going to confront Kylo Ren. And I love how he just like winks at C-3PO. But again, like for me, growing up with this and like knowing that she's now passed, it's even like, again, like I'm getting like a little welled up. It's so, to me, it's so sad. Like it holds so much more weight, that scene, knowing that like these were really, really good friends. And this could be one of the last things that like ever happened with them, like actually in real life.
Yeah, I mean, that aspect of it, certainly, after her death, Mark Hamill's spoken pretty, affectionately about Carrie Fisher and, what their relationship was truly like. And you never really know on set how colleagues work together. Do they become real friends? Are they just work partners? Are they, friendly while they're working together, and then they just kind of go their separate ways, maybe send a Christmas card or something like that occasionally. But you get the impression that these two actually did have a true fondness for one another. And I have a specific note that I had written about the scene you're referencing, because it did strike me exactly the same way that it struck you. And I made a specific note about the music choice when they bring Leia's theme on for that. And it's so powerful. I mean, there's no music that evokes emotion like Star Wars music. And it's because it's taken 40 years for all of this to happen. And we've lived with this music. We've known what this is. We've watched these movies so many times that you just play a snippet of a theme and it recalls all of the emotion of every time you've heard that theme. Again, I said it earlier, The Last Jedi is not a good movie, but I will absolutely recognize the parts that work. This scene works.
Okay. Now, obviously, we get him confronting Kylo Ren, and there's a lot. I'll ask you guys: was it obvious to you that he wasn't really there on the first watch through? Clearly, when you watch it back, there's the signs everywhere that his appearance has changed. He makes no marks whatsoever when he's fighting. But when you're first watching that scene, like Harrison, what was the emotion? Like, what did you think? Like, were you suspicious of like what's going on, or where is he? Like, what were your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious now, like, where the heck did he get the lightsaber that we just saw blow up a few minutes ago? That should be obvious, but it wasn't to me the first time. The only thing that kind of gave it away is his foot not making any red marks. And I don't think that I made any conclusions. I was just like, something's off. Like, what have I not seen? What's hidden that is yet to be revealed? I obviously did not guess it, but I immediately was aware that something was going to be revealed.
Rob, did you have any kind of clue about what was going on, or?
I would love to pretend like I had it figured out. I did not. I'm not that smart. I previously complained about the Force astral projection as kind of a way out of a situation. Oh, just the Force does this, and yeah, I know that it's sort of done that all throughout Star Wars, but there's been limitations to it. Reaching out through the Force to have a conversation is one thing. An astral projection is quite a bit further from what we'd seen before. So I had no reason to suspect that. And when I realized that's what it was, I kind of didn't like it. But it would have been cool to actually have him physically there, really, and to have that lightsaber fight mean a little bit more. But it's kind of a boss move too, to just be like, nope, I wasn't ever really there. I was just here to distract you, and now I'm dust.
Yeah, I do like the dialogue and the yin and the yang of when he asks Rey about the Force in the beginning and says, amazing. Like, everything you said was wrong. And then he uses that again with Ren when he tells him, the resistance is dead. When I kill you, I'll have killed the last Jedi. And he literally, like, word for word again says, like, amazing. Every word of what you said was wrong. The rebellion is reborn today. I really like the polar opposite of him finally coming around and being like, okay, you know, I might not be around to see it, but this is what I can do to give hope again. I like it. I think it's a fitting end. And again, I guess if you don't like his character portrayal, I mean, you're not going to like the way he goes out either, I don't think. I like it. I thought it was I guess fitting enough, because I don't know how else, like, it's not like I can sit here and say, well, if this would have happened, this would have been better. I can't distinctly say that. So just like I like what happened with Luke and how he was portrayed, I like how he finally, like, became one with the Force in this movie. Harrison, any thoughts?
I love that earlier in the film he literally says something to Rey, something along the lines of, what do you want me to go and face down the entire First Order with a laser sword? And then does that very thing. I think it's great. I agree with what you said. If you don't like Luke in this film, you're not going to like the way he goes out, most likely. I don't think that him going out the way he does is going to be the redeeming quality of Luke in this film. But being someone who does like Luke in this film, I love that ending. It's kind of like a dunked on him move. Like, dude, you wasted all of your time and I'm not even here. like the scene before Kylo even comes down and he's like, more, like he's just blasting him into oblivion. And then Hux is like, do you think you got him? I think that's one of the funniest lines ever. And then to come down and have him be like just full of rage and hatred and like clearly not thinking clear. I'm speaking of Kylo here. I think it's great. I love the way it ends, and then I love the way Luke just says, see you around, kid. And he understands that in that moment, what people genuinely needed was Luke the legend. They needed Luke the legend to light fire in the Resistance. And if I can jump a little ahead to The Rise of Skywalker, clearly there's no roadmap. But if you want to talk about one of the things that I think is great is how the idea about how this small group that's being hunted down by the First Order is the spark that's going to light the fire that will burn the First Order down. They send out a distress signal. Nobody responds. They are on their own. Later in The Rise of Skywalker, they send out a distress signal, or so to speak, and people respond. And that scene where Poe thinks he's alone and he flies around the corner and there's all those ships and the music plays is like one of the moments in theaters that every time I see it gives me chills. I think it's so great. And to see the difference of that and how Luke, being the legend he was, sparking some of that and some of the stuff that follows afterwards, of course, as well, I think is great. Luke understood the consequences of his choices. Earlier, we were talking about Luke and how it makes sense that he, at least for Matt, that he cut himself off the way he does. And I wanted to quote the great master Oogway from Kung Fu Panda, where he says, one often meets his destiny on the road he takes to avoid it. I think that entire thing plays really well into the entire existence of the Jedi, but also particularly into Luke's choices in what we see leads up to the sequel trilogy portrayed in The Last Jedi. And then him realizing this is what has become because of his choices. And now there is genuinely a time for Luke the legend. That maybe he shouldn't have tried to be Luke the legend at a specific time before, but now because of the darkness that has overcome the galaxy, a spark is genuinely needed that can only be given by a legend. And I think it's great. And like I said, it's one of those few moments that I think carries through really strongly into The Rise of Skywalker, into a moment that, like, I went and saw The Rise of Skywalker like 4 times in theaters, and every single time that scene happened, I like just lost it. I just started to cry. And part of it is because of what I felt, the complete opposite in this, just the absolute aloneness that this tiny group of people have in opposition to the entire First Order. I think it's great. I really do love that scene. And I think the lightsaber fight, if you want to call it that, is great. Like I don't even know what to call it, but like Kylo swings at him and Luke does like a triple like spin on his knee undertuck thing. Like it's like the wackiest looking thing ever. But I think it's so great, like especially knowing that he's an astral projection. Like there's no way that I think that an old Luke could do that. And I just think that it makes the dunk on Kylo Ren that much better.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Rob, any final thoughts on The Last Jedi, like anything that you just kind of want to sum up before we move into The Rise of Skywalker?
If you're one of those people who don't like how Luke dies at the end, what I will say to you is at least he didn't die of a broken heart.
Yes, that is true.
Outside of that, this movie is still terrible. There are fun parts in it. I actually do like the ending of this. I do like that Luke completely just suns him and just embarrasses him in every conceivable way. Just plays him like a fiddle. And, would I have loved to have seen him, not as a Force ghost, but as an actual physical person in the next film? Yeah, I don't necessarily love him, just sweating a little bit and then dropping his robes and he turns to dust. I don't really love that. I don't know that it necessarily feels like that makes sense to me, but I've already said that I don't think a lot of things in this movie make sense, but, yeah, I just think it really shows, like we've been talking about, just a lack of a roadmap and a lack of a clear direction. Like, hey guys, we're not all going to be making a movie together, but we have to make this cinematic trilogy function together. So we at least need to agree on a few principles from start to finish. How you choose to tell your part of the story is up to you, but we're going to align on this action, this action, this action, and this.
I think you make some really valid points. So Harrison, your final thoughts here on Last Jedi.
I was sitting quietly for a lot of this because I loved listening to the two of you, and there was just some things that I have to respond to, or else I won't sleep well at night. Specifically with Holdo light speed ramming through the ship and taking it out. Rob, I'm going to assume that you've played on a sports team or some type of competition. I don't know if you've ever been like down by 20 with like 4 minutes to go, and those are the best 4 minutes you've ever played in your entire life. Like, I think that there's extreme lengths that people go to in desperation, and for that reason, I love that scene with Hodel. Like, why haven't we light speed ram ships before? Because no one ever thought of it. Like, I mean, I guess we can now. I don't know, and I know that that's not going to convince anybody who disagrees with that. It's just my personal opinion of it. I think it's a great expression of the desperation that the Last Order is in, that one person would be willing to be like, I have no idea if this works. I could hit the ship and blow up and fly off like a piece of cotton for all I know, but I'm going to try it because it's literally the last resort. So I think it's great. I really do like that scene. I also wanted to talk about some of the comedy. I think this movie is way funny, and I forgot about it. I mean, the amount of times that Adam Driver yells, I like when the Millennium Falcon shows up and he's like, blow that piece of junk out of the sky. And like, it kills me. Or when Rey is on the island and she's like practicing with the lightsaber and she like cuts the rock in half and then the rock falls down the mountain and like knocks out those things cart. I probably rewatched it like 10 times and was crying laughing. I think it's one of the best things of physical comedy I've ever seen. I was also just kind of in a laughing mood that day. So I think that there's a lot of things about it that I can understand why people are so against this. So let me kind of give my closing thoughts after just adding those two random tidbits in there. The Last Jedi is most definitely divisive or divisive, however you say it. And I understand why. It's not one of those films that like I look at, I'm like, why don't people like this or not like it? And it really comes down to this entire conversation we've had is how do you feel about Luke? And I think that was the crumbling point for a lot of people. And then as it started to crumble, it was easier to see those other faults. Where for the people who do like it, it's easy to see why everything is the way it is. We like that Luke is the way he is. And more than anything, I kind of just, if you don't like the film, don't blame Rian Johnson. I would blame Disney and just the lack of a plan. Like I think about this why was Luke gone in The Force Awakens? Why was there a map to him that was the MacGuffin, was a map to Luke? And now you're going to write a story that you kind of have to explain why Luke would be gone and not wanting to be found. And I kind of like the direction Ryan went with it. I think it adds to the story of the Jedi really well. I think there's powerful things in here about. I just lost my train of thought. I think there's powerful things in here about Rey being a nobody. I think there's powerful things in here about trying to move on from the past and creating new things. I love Kylo in this. I think there's powerful development for redemption with Kylo Ren and Ben Solo. I think it's just a film that I love to watch, and I love the ideas of it. Is it perfect? No, there's definitely some holes. There's definitely some scenes that don't work super well, but I definitely don't feel it's as messy as other people do, specifically because I love the direction that Luke was taken, while Mark Hamill himself and many others disagree with. And I think that that's kind of the biggest falling out point for everybody, is you kind of lie on either two sides of that. I don't think that there's anybody who's indifferent, but I am curious, as I finish on my closing thought here, Rob, have you seen any of Rian Johnson's other films? Like, have you seen Knives Out or Looper or anything like that?
I'm positive I've seen something else of his, and I'm gonna cheat real quick and pull up his filmography. I've not seen Knives Out. I don't believe I've seen Looper. I'm going to just go ahead and say this is probably the only film of his that I can confidently say I've seen.
Okay, well, if you have Amazon Prime, you need to watch Knives Out. It's on Prime. It's so good. I think it shows the talent of Rian Johnson incredibly well. But that's my plug for Rian Johnson. Either way, I think that all of that aside, writing choices aside, character choices aside, this is an incredibly well-made film. Technically, I think this is one of the most beautiful films cinematically in Star Wars. Yes, there are some moments that clearly don't work, like the throne scene, but there are some other moments that's like, this is some of the best looking Star Wars we've ever got, and Star Wars looks great. The music is great, and I love the character choices, particularly the character arcs for Poe and becoming a leader, for Finn and becoming someone who gives himself to something instead of just seeking what is for him, and also definitely the character development of Rey, and how she kind of accepts that she is Rey from nowhere. There's so many things that I love about it that even if I was really passionate about Luke or not, I don't think that I would have complaints, just because there's so much else that I love. That was quite a bit of a ramble, but it's just a film that I don't think if I were to talk about it, all of my ideas cohesively, I would take over the rest of this entire show. So I have to be brief.
Okay. Yeah. Harrison, I don't think I need to say anything else. I think you said it perfectly. So, guys, that brings us to the Rise of Skywalker. And I think one thing that I'd really like to do is I just actually, as we're talking, I just sent both of you something. Did you both get that link?
I received something, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
I did.
Harrison, did you get that as well?
Yes, I did.
Is it something that you, as we're talking, is it something that you can look at?
Yes, let me mute myself, though, so it doesn't go all nuts.
Okay, so, Rob, can you look at this as well as we're talking? So, what I'd like, because I think it blends into the topic of how we've talked about there's nobody who hates Star Wars as much as Star Wars fans. On this video, go to 1 minute and 6 seconds. And because I think it leads into the first topic that I want to talk about with the Rise of Skywalker. So fast forward to 106 in the video and do me a favor and just hit play. And I'll just explain to everybody what we're looking at, because it's a very quick video. So basically, what I'm having Rob and Harrison look at while we're getting ready to talk about Rise of Skywalker for the listeners is the crowd reaction to the first official reveal of the Rise of Skywalker. At this point, we had no clue what it was even called. And the reason I want to start the show with them watching this is because the reaction to the title, The Rise of Skywalker, which I don't know, with a title like that, what did you think you were going to get? Because I know the ending scene is very, I don't think it's love or hate it. I think everybody hates it. I mean, I don't care, but everybody I talk to hates it. And everybody hates, like, now that Palpatine is back. But if you watch that trailer and listen to the crowd when his voice comes on the screen, it doesn't sound like anybody hates it. It sounds like everybody is intrigued. So I just find it interesting that probably those same people are just the same ones that are just, again, sometimes Star Wars can be very toxic. I've always been fascinated by the reaction to that release.
So I was just able to, while you were describing it, I was able to watch the clip that you sent. And yeah, it's the one where Rey does the flippy thing over the fighter that's chasing her and flips out the lightsaber and cuts it in half. And I think we've probably all seen it a bunch of times. Yeah, I think the initial fan reaction, it kind of mirrored mine when I saw the trailer for the first time, and I heard the laugh, and I went, "Wait a second, is that? It can't be. Is that Palpatine? Like they're bringing him back now?" And I thought it was an interesting choice. At this point, I was just like, why not? I guess. I don't know. They're definitely trying to redo so much of the original trilogy. And coming off of The Last Jedi that I was not a fan of, I was like, yeah, let me see what this means. And it doesn't work. I don't know that you need Palpatine in this third film. It's not set up well. Like, it's just like, oh, hey, you guys, remember Palpatine? He's back. That's pretty much what they do.
Yeah, I don't think it helps that. I do think there were some missteps along the way, and I think one of them is, like, the initial reveal too after is Palpatine being announced on Fortnite. Which I don't understand how the heck that was the decision that was made. But Harrison, like, what do you think about that initial, like, reaction?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go on record right now and say I think that first Rise of Skywalker teaser is one of the greatest trailers ever made, period. There's some great trailers out there. And for what a trailer is supposed to do to get people excited about a film to go buy tickets, I think that's one of the most successful ones ever. I can't tell you how many times I watched it. And this is why I say that. People either loved or hated The Last Jedi. People didn't go see Solo. It flopped at the box office. Disney takes a hiatus from Star Wars, and we're finally getting a new film. It's the conclusion of the entire Skywalker saga. And you got to get people excited to go see your movie. And I think that was an exciting way to do it. And when I heard Palpatine's laugh in the trailer, I was like, no way, that's Palpatine's laugh. Like, I immediately got excited because, it's Palpatine's laugh. Yeah. How do you hear that in Star Wars and not be excited about that character? Now, after the moment when I started thinking about it, I was like, wait, they're bringing Palpatine back? Like, how's that going to work? I started to question things. But did it make me want to go see the movie? 100%. Yeah. 100% I want to go see the movie after that trailer. Where before I was kind of like, I'm not too sure. So yeah, I think it's a great trailer. And I think it's interesting to see that reaction, especially knowing how the reaction is to the actual film. I think that as a conclusion to the final Skywalker saga, this is the last film of the story of Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. How can you conclude that without Palpatine? Like, it would feel a little weird, but I think that the way that Palpatine was incorporated doesn't work well. I think the title of Rise of Skywalker got tons of people excited, but not at all what we thought was going to happen at the end of the film. Like, I have my own theory of what I thought the title meant, and if you guys are interested, I can give it to you. But I think that we got excited about the ideas. Like, if this is how the saga is going to end, yeah, Palpatine should be a part of it. That makes sense. But you got to execute it well. I don't want some cloning dude connected to some puppet string who would just, blast the lightning until he is disintegrated for the third time. you know, I don't know. So again, great intention, poor execution, I think.
Okay. So, I mean, certainly, at least in my view, this movie starts off on the right foot. I thought it started very interesting. One thing I will say about this movie is it moves at a breakneck pace.
Oh my
There's
goodness, yeah.
really no letting up once it gets started. It just goes from scene to scene to scene to location, and they're like really moving. There's not a lot of time to stop. And like appreciate some of the deeper moments. But I will say I love the look of Exegol, just the music, the lightning, how it connects. I thought regardless of how he came back, when we first see Palpatine, I thought that was a really cool look. And I love him repeating the line from Revenge of the Sith about the dark side of the Force. I liked his look. I thought it was cool. You see it later in the movie, but Rob, I think you would maybe appreciate it a little bit more because we grew up on it and I knew that it was cut. I love that from the art book of the original Return of the Jedi that they finally used the Emperor's throne on Exegol for the Sith. I thought that was awesome. But I like the opening. I like Kylo going to see Palpatine. I like Palpatine's look. I'll let you start. What did you think of the opening? Because I have my own thoughts on Rise of Skywalker that we'll obviously get into. But did the opening hook you?
I was captivated by Palpatine being back, and what does that mean, and how does that happen? I had my concerns because, okay, so you're going to introduce your big bad as in the third film of your trilogy. It felt it felt strange, but to talk about the Skywalker saga, yeah, Palpatine was there at the beginning of when this thing really started, and I think to tie a bow on it with him being involved, it makes sense. I wish it would have been set up sooner. I don't know necessarily that we needed, to hear the laugh in the first or second film of the trilogy. We at least needed a clue that we could go back to and say, that was it. More so than just Snoke's existence, because there's really nothing that gives you anything to understand who he is or where he came from. There's no smoking gun as to where this guy came from. We just see him as the digital form in the first movie, and I don't believe we actually see him physically in the first movie.
Nope.
So we finally get to see him in the second one, and he's kind of he was either a clone of Palpatine or something that was created by him, but we don't get the breadcrumbs that lead us to it is Palpatine. I would have liked that a little bit more. I think that would have paid off his presence a little bit better.
Yeah. Harrison, what do you think of the opening? And maybe like, I mentioned the pace of this movie. Maybe go into that a little bit.
I wrote in my initial review of it when I saw it way back in December, this story starts at light speed and doesn't give you a chance to slow down. Like it literally is way too fast. And we talked about it before. It's trying to retcon things and be a sequel to The Force Awakens while also trying to be a sequel to The Last Jedi while also not trying to be a sequel to that. Like it is trying to do way too much in way too short amount of time while also trying to make Palpatine feel earned, which is completely impossible. You can't do all of that. and it's got to introduce tons of things into Star Wars lore, or maybe not introduce them, but introduce them into, the big Star Wars lore, meaning the films, the big budget stuff. Maybe the stuff's been brought up in comics or the extended universe, but it hasn't been in films, and we got to make sense of all this, and what the heck is Exegol? If you've never read a comic, you have no idea. And it's just, it's doing way too much, but not doing enough. It's kind of sad.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that the thing is, though, that it's so interesting that, like I said, I went and saw this movie like 4 times in theaters, and every single time I loved it. Like, I had a time of my life. I'd go see it again. But it's so weird to enjoy this film on its own while totally understanding that, like, this film was garbage. Like it does not work as a conclusion to a trilogy. It doesn't work to the conclusion of an entire saga at all. Like, this feels the most disconnected from the Skywalker saga any film has, even more so than Solo. But man, I watch it and have a great time. It's so weird.
Yeah, can I just say that I agree with everything that you said. It's so disconnected because, again, it feels like more of a sequel to The Force Awakens, especially with like Finn. It's so freaking obvious he's Force sensitive, which seems like a sequel to The Force Awakens because it's completely cut out in The Last Jedi. But then there's things about the Force that they did in The Last Jedi that they keep in Rise of Skywalker. So it's like, well, we don't want you to acknowledge The Last Jedi, but maybe we do. So it's so funny, but at the end of the day, yeah, like Rob said it numerous times. When you stop and think, there's almost too much to unpack and it'll make your head explode. But I will say right now, like, every time I watch The Rise of Skywalker, I don't care. I don't care. I get a kick out of this movie. Like, I don't know, but just something about it just hits me in the feels. I have a great time with it. There's certain scenes that I absolutely love, but yeah, you stop for 5 consecutive seconds and say, I need to think about this movie as the concluding chapter to 40 years, and forget it. You're better off surviving 14 rattlesnake bites. Like, like you can't do it. But at the end of the day, yeah, I don't care. And I can separate this movie, which is kind of incredible for me, but I can separate it and say, Harrison, like you said, I have a blast when I watch this movie.
Matt, I think what you're talking about is really quite compelling because I have kind of mixed feelings on this movie at times. And I'll try to explain it as best I can because I think it's kind of hard to really get into words. As a movie, does it work? Yeah, it does. As the end of a trilogy, does it work? Mostly. I remember the first time I had seen it coming away thinking, okay, I think that was satisfying. I'm happy with what I saw. As the final film of a 9-movie Skywalker saga, does it work as the finale? No. And I think that's how I feel about it.
I think that's totally accurate. I think when you think about it as the cap, it doesn't work. And I think there's decisions that were made in there. And I think, we don't have to go too far into it, but certainly, Rob, we talked about it because I think I sent you like several articles after this came out about the original script. And again, hindsight is always 2020. When this movie was going to be done by, is it Colin Trevorrow is how you say his name? And it was called Duel of the Fates, which I don't know if I would want that more than Rise of Skywalker. Again, hindsight's always 2020. But there were certainly elements of Duel of the Fates that maybe made it seem like this would be more like that could have been more of a concluding chapter to tie up 40 years worth of the Skywalker saga. Certainly, I think maybe Palpatine not being on screen and being more of a, they said he showed up in recordings and he had left things behind. Again, would that have worked better on film? We don't know because we don't have it. But I think there's some interesting concepts there that should, maybe some of those ideas were used. It could have ended better because Daisy Ridley has actually gone on record and saying that, like, right up until filming, they weren't sure if they were going with her character Rey as Palpatine's granddaughter. Like, it was at what is the phrase 0 hour that decision was made. Like, yes, we're going to go with that. It was still in the debating stages where they were going with her.
I kind of wish they would have left her as a nobody.
Yeah.
Again, like the whole, like, you, Harrison, you said it and I've said it, well, they try to do this and, well, we don't want to acknowledge it, but like they take like the haphazard way out of like, oh, I didn't lie to you. They were nobody because they chose to be. Like, oh my God. Like, give me
stupid.
Like, give me a break. They were nobody because they chose. Like, oh God. But again, I'll just keep saying it. I kind of don't care.
Yeah, it's so weird to watch this movie because I read somewhere that the writers of it, they said that the two of them, I don't remember who it was, but they were saying that they've never rewritten a film more than they have this one. And granted, I also don't want to be in their position to have to follow up all of the social reaction to everything Star Wars, in addition to dealing with Carrie Fisher passing away having to write that character out when clearly they had a plan for her. That is a tough situation. Good for them for probably doing as good as they could with the conditions they were put under, from social expectations to producers to just writing potential and time and production capacity. And it's so weird to watch this movie and just be absolutely infuriated by it and the absolute failure it is as a sequel to anything coherent. And yet watch it and just love every moment of it. Well, not every, but just about, and get chills in moments and just be grinning from ear to ear with excitement. And then to take a step back and be like, yeah, that does not work at all, but I still loved it. And I don't know how to talk about this movie outside of that. And this is what I have to say. When the Rise of Skywalker title came out, I remember sitting down with my brother and being like, this is not what's going to happen, but this is what should happen. The story of the Jedi, particularly if you like The Last Jedi, is that the legacy of the Jedi and what we've seen in the film is a little bit of failure. They have failed in every way that they should as protectors of the galaxy. And the Sith clearly has failed their own, whatever their mission is. And I was hoping, I don't have the same words and the same expression I had for it, but I was hoping that the Jedi and Sith thing would die and that we would get a rise of something new, a more gray-ish Force user as a Skywalker. And I thought that it was going to be Ben Solo. I thought Rey was going to die to save Ben Solo, and he would become this morally gray new form of a Force user as a Skywalker. I was hoping for that. Now, in hindsight, I don't think that would have been a good idea. I don't think that would have been received well by a lot of people. But that was the idea, that I wanted new territory, and this is like the return to form while also just being a complete mess. And it's like, well, whatever. I'll watch it and I'll have a good time. And I don't care. It doesn't work and I don't care, but I'm bothered at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, you wonder, Rob, the Rise of Skywalker, you wonder before, the passing of Carrie Fisher and, again, how do you prepare to try and do, that justice and be tasteful? I think they did the best they could using literally, like, they used deleted scenes from The Force Awakens to put her in this movie. And I think much like I was like surprised and like really pleased with the Fast and the Furious saga, how they made a tribute to Paul Walker. I thought it was like, wow, these movies are mindless, and they found a way to like make that really tasteful. Like if you've never seen it, I thought they did the best they could with this. But I often wonder, it seemed like the three movies were meant to be the three originals. So The Force Awakens is about Han. The Last Jedi is about Luke. And The Rise of Skywalker, I would imagine, should have been about Leia. So again, I wonder what maybe the plan would have been had she not passed away. And if what we got would have been completely different and it wouldn't have been Rey taking up that title.
It's a fascinating thing to think about. And I agree that they approached the unfortunate passing of Carrie Fisher in about the best way they could have. I mean, there's a lot of ways this could have been terrible. I mean, just terrible and immoral in some ways, depending on how they approached it. I think they handled it in the best way. I cannot conceive of a way they could have done it better, and still been able to keep her as part of the film, still be able to keep her character, who is wildly important to Star Wars and wildly important to pop culture, to still keep the character in the film, have meaningful contributions to the film, and not do it in a way that would be creepy. I think that in the future, not that I'm hoping for untimely deaths of stars before their time, but the next time that somebody passes in the middle of production or in the middle of a film saga, I think they're going to look to how this was handled as the roadmap for how to do it right.
Well, we certainly, we have something that I think everybody is curious what they're going to do in the MCU. I think, we certainly have that opportunity coming up to see, okay, we still want to continue, and that's what Chadwick would want. Talking about Black Panther, there's an opportunity there to see, how they can do this and still, be tasteful and respectful. I think they did a really good job here. And I think the fact that the very last scene, granted it's digital, but I think about this like every single time I watch Rise of Skywalker. But when Leia gets walked off, when she's going to commune with Ben, that is her real life daughter that is walking that character off screen. And I sit there and think about like what that probably like meant to her, how many takes maybe she had to do, thinking about like on camera, the person that I'm supposed to be walking off is like my mother. Like I am walking her to her, like this character to her final like resting place. I think about that like so intensely when I watch that scene. And whoever's idea that was to maybe even ask her, like, we think this would be respectful. Like, how would you feel about doing this? Like, just again, if somebody had that idea, kudos to them to think about, again, how do we do this respectfully and like honor her in the best way that we could possibly try and do.
I'm sad you beat me to it, Matt, because I think about that very frequently. I think it was done of all things to include, and I think that's one of the best.
This is just a sidebar. We talked about this in part one, but I love the scene. I think it's actually really cool because it's a callback to Empire Strikes Back. But once again, can we just talk about Harrison Ford and how he's a badass and how he doesn't care? Like he comes back as Han Solo, and like, no offense, I don't know if they asked him to, but okay, he's supposed to be a memory, but in Kylo Ren's memory, like he grew a scruffy beard. like because that's not how he looked the last time he was on screen. Like I just love how he's like, yeah, I don't need a haircut, I don't need to shave. I just love how he's like, oh, okay, I'll do it, but like I'm showing up in sweatpants and a meatball stain on my hoodie.
He is, the more I learn about him, he is one of the most crotchety old men I've ever met. Like I don't know if you know that movie that was on Disney Plus, The Call of the Wild, with Harrison Ford.
Yes.
It's about like a dog in Alaska. He refused to film with a live dog. He refused to go anywhere out of LA. So the entire film is CG, including the dog he's with, because he refused to go out of LA for a movie that's about a dog in Alaska. Like, oh God, he's the most crotchety old man, and I find it so funny. And especially in the interview where like someone was like asking him like, "Are you a Force ghost?" And he's like, "What the heck is a Force ghost?"
Yeah, and they're like, "Well, it could be like, yeah," and like he literally like the next line is like, "Look, I don't care." Like I could care less. Like, sure, whatever you want to say. Like, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, I think it's so great.
I've seen an interview with him where he was asked if he got nostalgic when he put the jacket on again, for the first time, and he said, "I'll tell you what I got. I got paid."
Yeah, it's like, oh my God, it's so. And again, I think it just, oh my God, it makes like, to me, it makes him so like endearing. Like, I just love how much like this classic role, like you said, I mean, more so than Indiana Jones. I think when you think about Harrison Ford, I do think Han Solo is number one. And I think Indiana Jones is number two. At least that's my perception on it. But to see how much he doesn't seem to care for Han Solo, but he has a deeper connection to Indiana Jones, I think is hysterical, especially since he's known for the role that he seems to care less about.
I find it so funny.
He portrayed Han Solo in 5 films and portrayed Indiana Jones in 3. We don't speak of the 4th, by the way, for anybody who's listening. It's like, wait a second, we don't speak of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It is interesting for sure.
That is Rob's Last Jedi.
I think Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is everybody's Last Jedi.
So Harrison, I want to get your thought on this because you brought this up. So Kylo Ren, I think we can all agree. I think he's the most consistent character throughout the trilogy. And one thing that I really like about this movie in particular is when he starts to work with Palpatine, and I think he's playing him along, but I love the fact that he gets his mask back. And not because it's cool looking. I love like the cuts of red in it. I had his original mask, and then when that came out, I spent way too much money than I should have to buy the next version of it. But I like it for the fact that I actually think it shows it's more of Palpatine having that mask remade and put back together because I control you. Just like Vader, you're mine. And I think that's what having the mask back represents, is that Palpatine thinks he has him just like he had Vader. And Ren certainly has other plans for what he wants to do. But I've always just interpreted the mask coming back as more of a control. And I thought that was like a clever like story plot. And maybe I'm just totally wrong. And it was like, we want to sell toys and, like have excuses for people like this guy to just spend money that they shouldn't. But I like it.
I do too. I've thought about it just like Kylo Ren's back as Kylo Ren, as the tip of the spear for the dark side. How do you bring that back? It's like, well, he's got to wear his helmet. And then Disney's like, oh, we like that. Let's put red lines in it so we can totally sell it a second time. Like it kind of serves 2 purposes, and I think it's great. And I mean, it's a cool looking helmet. I'm not going to complain. And
So I think it's great. But yeah, Adam Driver as Kylo Ren, I think, is just one of like the best things that I ever could have happened out of the sequel trilogy.
I think for sure one of the things, talking about the helmet, he wears it in the first one because he's trying so hard to be like Darth Vader, and then part of that's the helmet that he doesn't need for any reason. Like, it doesn't do anything for him. Like, I don't know, maybe there are Bluetooth speakers in there and he can listen to the Sweet Cantina theme like anytime he wants. I don't know. It doesn't really seem to give him any advantage other than just the look. And Snoke makes a comment in The Last Jedi about, he kind of mocks the helm, and then we see him go smash it later, and then he puts it back on for the third one. I think it's definitely intentional. It could be intentional to sell toys, but I do think there's a deeper intention behind it too.
Yeah. Again, I've just always, like, from the moment I watched that movie, that was my thought on it. But the one thing that is, even though he does seem the most consistent, there is, one thing that is completely inconsistent about his character. Well, not completely inconsistent, but it's inconsistent compared to what normally happens with him. Is in The Last Jedi, he makes the same mention, we talked about it, as Luke does, where it's kind of time for this light side and the dark side to end. He says that to Rey in The Last Jedi. And then in this movie, he's, again, which feels like more of a sequel to The Force Awakens than The Last Jedi, he says, well, I'm going to turn you to the dark side. And it was like, wait, didn't you completely, like, not believe in that anymore? Like, you thought it was ridiculous? Like, that crap needed to end. So I think that's pretty much like one of the major things that is not consistent with his character in a series that he feels like the most consistent. And speaking of consistency, Rob, what are your thoughts? Because again, I like their dynamic. When Poe and Finn are on screen together, it's great. I certainly know that there was a lot of talk about how they had brought to Disney that there, was more to Finn and Poe. That certainly you kind of picked up on it on The Force Awakens, that there might be something there, that they were maybe more than friends. And I think they actually really lobbied for them to put that in the movie. But Poe seems to flip-flop a lot from, well, I'm not Leia, or we need to do this. I just think, as great as he is, and I like him a lot, there's a lot of inconsistency with him. I mean, there's a lot of inconsistency, but I feel like it shows in this movie as it goes along that he just kind of flops when it might be necessary for, like, something to seem like it needs a shakeup.
What's interesting about him, we went through the entire Force Awakens breakdown, and I'm not sure how many times we even said his name. It's something that kind of occurred to me as we were going through. Like, I think Disney wanted him to be way cooler of a character than what we got. I think he was supposed to be our replacement Han, and it never really works that way, through no fault of Oscar Isaac. But the character is kind of up and down. In terms of the proposed Finn and Poe romance, why not? Like, it would at least give Finn something. I think in some ways they were wanting us to. There was supposed to be some mystery around, is Rey going to have a romantic entanglement with any of these other characters? Would it be Finn? There's certainly, he does spend a good bit of his time on screen, yelling, "Where's Rey?" And you got to wonder why that is, why he prioritizes her over others. Does he like her? Is he in love with her? I think we were supposed to question that. I think if they did bring a Poe and Finn romantic relationship into the third movie without doing anything different in the first two, it would have felt it would have felt like it came out of nowhere. I think I don't know that it's set up well in the first two.
No, I think again, like I think they talked about how they pitched for it in the first one, and they were kind of against it. And Rob, when you were saying like, and Harrison, you said this too, but I just had the exact thought of when you're like, he spends a lot of the movie like yelling for Ray. Like Finn is, and I know you guys have. Well, Rob, I'm sure you've seen them. Harrison, I'm guessing. I'm going to assume he is the Sam Witwicky of the Transformers movies, screaming for Optimus Prime. Like,
yeah.
Like every chance he gets, he just screams for Ray. Like that's exactly what I just thought of. Is just splice those two together, and that would be a funny YouTube clip.
I think the scene that comes to mind is when she's on the Death Star. Like she takes that little canoe on like the open waters out to the Death Star, and then starts fighting Kylo, and the waves are crashing everywhere. And then somehow Finn's like, "Oh, I gotta get my canoe out there now too. Like Rey's out there, I gotta go get her." So he goes out there literally to stand on a piece of the Death Star and scream Rey while he's blasted with seawater, just to get force pushed back into a wave like that. Really? That's all he's there for.
Can we talk about that fight for a second? Because it's pretty bad.
I was literally just gonna say that, because I was gonna say, okay, let's transition, because Rob doesn't like these lightsaber battles at all. So I've never talked about them with Harrison.
Yeah. So there are stunt doubles in Hollywood for a reason, because these are people who actually know how to fight. Like they're actually like really good at it. And much of that battle just does not work to me. They try too hard for us to see the real actors' faces. And it's not good. I mean, and listen, it's not their fault. The average person, even a pretty good athlete, to learn martial arts, to learn sword fighting, to learn any of these things, even for somebody who's a good athlete, and even when people get put through boot camps, like you see this all the time, that people get put through these kinds of things to get ready for big fight movies. It's not easy. And it really makes you appreciate when, things like The Lord of the Rings, when they do look really good. Things like The Witcher, like when the fight scenes do look really good. It makes you appreciate them that much more. This one, it's not good. And it's really a low point for me of this film.
Harrison, what do you think? Because I've known that Rob like can't stand that. I've never ever asked you what you think about it.
I'm just gonna like read off what I said after I went and saw one in the theaters one time. I said, action is everything that I've been wanting to see for the longest time in Star Wars. Knowledgeable and powerful trained Force users. The lightsaber part of it was not so as thrilling. Doesn't even hold a flame to Maul versus Qui-Gon. It can't even be compared to Anakin versus everyone. I was left wanting a great lightsaber fight with a new score from Williams. I got neither, but those wants were quickly vanished with the wonderful Force powers. Like my favorite thing from Star Wars when I was younger was The Force Awakens, and I like never even hit the button to swing a lightsaber. Like I would just walk around and like pick a clone up, and then I'd electrocute him, and then I'd like launch him into something that explodes. Like I played through the whole game just using the Force, and I always wanted to see that in a movie. So there's like a bit of wish fulfillment that makes me really love that fight, where like they're stopping each other's lightsabers with the Force. But at the same time, like this is the most boring lightsaber battle ever. The music isn't exciting. Like if you think about like great lightsaber battles in Star Wars, whether it's part of the original trilogy on the Death Star, or on in Return of the Jedi, or in Cloud City in Empire, it's driven by emotion, and it has great music that's become iconic. Later in the prequel trilogies, obviously you have Mace Windu. What did that come from? We have what's his name now? Darth Maul. Darth Maul, Mace Windu, totally the same person. We get Darth Maul and Qui-Gon versus Obi-Wan, iconic. Later, we get
Anakin versus Obi-Wan. Like these lightsabers fights are connected to great music, and that never happened. So that's my biggest complaint from it. I do understand that the stunts don't look good, the swords work doesn't look good. But at the same time, I'm just kind of having fun. I don't care. I'm watching it anyway type of attitude. Or like I can wholly admit that it's not great, but watching it, I'm not too bothered by it.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have we said that in this review of
It's so weird.
in this short time? Like, I just like literally that's the catchphrase for this episode. I don't care. Like,
especially because we talked about so much earlier about how much Star Wars meant to us and how seriously we take things, and how we had a fallout with The Last Jedi, or didn't have a fallout with it, because of how much we do care about Star Wars. And Rob hasn't. I don't know if he doesn't care, but like it's so funny that like we talk about how deeply we care about Star Wars and how important it is to us, and how we take it so seriously, and then we get to this is like a mess. And we're like, don't care. Like it's so out of left field. But like I think it's one of the best ways to watch this movie. It's because it's really fun.
Yeah, I think because there's so many. I think because when you're watching the movie, I think because it's so like you said, it's so fast paced that it doesn't give you a time to stop. And there's like, for me, there's just enough sprinkled in of nostalgia for me to like get really emotional. And then by the time I'm starting to come down, there's another emotional kick. There's Leia passing and I'm like so emotional, but like, I think they did it so tastefully that I'm like thinking about that. But before that, I'm like, okay, it was really cool to see him like snatch the necklace off of Rey. Like, I think that's really cool. And then you see Lando and I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool to see him. And like, he's like, Billy D. Williams still has just like this really cool, like hip personality and on-screen presence. And while you're watching the movie, it never gives me time to think about how much it's just so disconnected, even from itself. But I never have time to stop and think about it because there's always like something really cool, like peppered in between that. So it doesn't give you time to stop and think. Rob, I've been talking for a while. What do you think of that assessment?
It's pretty spot on. There's a lot of squirrel, and then you just kind of like divert your attention away from whatever was happening that was actually probably not good or kind of dumb or kind of terrible. And oh, look, squirrel, like it diverts your attention that fast. And sometimes it's nostalgia. Sometimes it's something else. Sometimes it's even a heartfelt moment that I can't even say actually really works, but somehow does, where C-3PO says, "I'm just taking one last look at my friends." Like that
right.
Parts of it there's parts of it that don't work for me, but then there's also parts of it that do work for me.
And then it's completely negated like 5 minutes later.
It's literally retconned immediately.
Yeah. But he because maybe you'll want to piggyback off this. Like, he also has that line to R2 where he's like, in the event I don't make it back, like, I just want you to know, like, however he says it, like, you've been a great friend, like my best one, or my only one, and like my best one, in fact. And I'm just like, okay, you're two freaking robots, but like, yeah, to these two robots, like, Jesus Christ, like, you think about you think about everything that they've been through together, and I'm like, he is your best friend, like, 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 it's so stupid. But there's just like these little moments that maybe they shouldn't work, but it's like, all right, again, Harrison, I don't care.
Yeah. The thing is that they don't work, but like they totally do. Like, and I gotta say, the humor with C-3PO in this movie is the dumbest and funniest thing in all of Star Wars. Like, it's stupid. It shouldn't be funny, but every time it is. And I love C-3PO. And then we get those moments where he says, "I'm taking one last look at my friends," and it's like, oh my gosh. It's really touching. And then we get Babu Frick, who's like probably the greatest character in all of Star Wars. I love him. Like,
and Dio. Like, Dio's he's, and how did we never mention BB-8?
Oh, BB-8's the best. How did we never bring him up?
He wasn't brought up.
Thing.
This is the first time his name's been mentioned in this entire recap.
Okay, yep. BB-8 is great. I'm sorry we never mentioned it, but I got to say that like when I mentioned this earlier, when everybody shows up and all the ships show up, when Zori shows up, also that's like the coolest name ever, Zori. But when Zori shows up and then Babu Frick pops up, and he's like, "Hey!" Like I louder at that moment than I did in the rest of the movie. Like it's so funny. I also, as we're on the topic of Zori, I wish. We've talked about this being a sequel to The Force Awakens. I wish this could be so that we could get Kerry Russell as Zori more, because I think she's great. But yeah, there's just so much that's just like it doesn't work and does at the same time. But I'm really surprised we haven't mentioned BB-8, because like he's probably the cutest and one of the best characters in the entire sequel trilogy. He's so adorable.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things that like just again like it's a small scene, but again like it tugs at my nostalgia strings, and I just think about it in terms of the characters, and I think about it in terms of maybe the actors. I don't know what it is, but when Poe is sitting there and he's like talking to Leia's body, and he's like, I don't know how to do this, like, and he's like, I'm not ready. And here comes Lando, and he's like, neither were we. And he just says, we had each other, like me, Luke, Leia. And I'm just like that puts me into the mode of like, no matter what no matter how I feel about it or how discombobulated it is, like I sit there and think about it, and he's like, we had each other, but who's ever ready? And I'm just like, this really is it. Like, and especially for like me being like such a small child when this franchise like hugely impacted my life. Like thinking about like, oh my God, like it is over. And like character wise, like even real life wise, like somebody like you don't have each other anymore. Like, like Carrie Fisher passed away and you don't have each other. And, who knows when, maybe because of how Hollywood is, or God, the pandemic and whatever the heck is going on in life. Like, I just think about it from a standpoint of like, well, what if you guys what if they actually never see each other again? Like, I don't know why I just think about all of that. So I don't know, Rob, since our age is a little bit closer, I think about it like that.
I think about it a little bit too, and it's hard to watch this movie without thinking about Carrie Fisher's death happening in the process. It's one of those things that is somewhat scene breaking at times, because you're cognizant of it and you know what's really going on. And I don't know that I'll ever be able to watch this movie without thinking about the fact that they had to work around it. And there's going to be double meanings in so much of these moments and of her lines that you're going to read as things about life, because of, she's speaking posthumously at this point. It's like I said, it's going to pull you out of the experience of the movie. But when we're talking about something that we all clearly have such emotional investment in, push your chips all in the middle, go all in for it. Who cares?
Yeah. Harrison, any follow up on that?
I think that it's just, no, I'm just going to leave what Rob said. I would mess it up if I said anything.
Okay. I think one last scene that I want to talk about, and we're kind of getting into the end of it. And I think, again, when they have their fight, Luke is a Force ghost. I'm kind of hit or miss on. I do love when he pulls the X-Wing out of the water. Like, oh God, the music that accompanies it, again, hit me right in the nostalgia feels. But one scene that I love more than almost anything else in Rise of Skywalker is you get to Exegol, Rey's there, and Ben shows up. He's not Kylo Ren anymore. He's Ben Solo. And she's facing off with the Emperor, and he's like, strike me down. I think Exegol looks awesome. The throne looks awesome. You have all these Sith Eternal doing the Cupid Shuffle. I mean, that looks a little ridiculous, but like when she goes to act like she's going to strike him down, she puts the lightsaber back and she force passes it to Ben. I don't care how you feel about it being practical that happens or that's not how the Force works. What I love is he has, in that moment, if you follow the trail, he has Anakin's lightsaber. And he has Anakin's saber when Anakin was good. And the guy that he wanted to so badly model himself after in B, he too has been switched. I love it. I think it's great. I love the fact that if you follow the trail, like I said, he has Anakin's lightsaber. He doesn't have Luke's. He has Anakin's. I love that. Maybe it shouldn't mean anything, but it does to me.
I completely agree. That is one of my favorite scenes. From the moment he lands and he's like sprinting and he jumps and like wrecks himself on that chain thing. He's like, ow! And then like runs and does like a no-look shot behind the back and then gets the lightsaber and like pulls it down and he kind of looks at the guys and like shrugs, does like the Han Solo shrug. And he also does like the Han Solo finger point. There's just so much about that scene that's like, this is everything we want from Ben Solo. He is Han Solo and Anakin Skywalker wrapped up in one in the best way possible. And I think it's great. On top of it just being like a thrilling scene, to have the lightsaber pass in that way is pretty sweet. I love that scene.
Yeah, Rob, any thoughts on just the lightsaber passing in general?
I've previously stated that I'm not a huge fan of just the Force does this now, because it eliminates the stakes in a scene, because we'll find ourselves in future Star Wars in a situation where our heroes are in trouble and we don't believe that they're truly in trouble because the writers will just invent a new way for the Force to work that'll just save them. So I'm a little leery of that. But in terms of just, removing Star Wars as a whole and just talking about this movie by itself, yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. So I think the scene with Palpatine getting somewhat resurrected, it was cool to see him back. Seeing him get basically evaporated. Okay, whatever. I think the Force lightning was actually really cool, like just blasting into the sky. I thought that was pretty good. I think the most the last thing to really talk about with this episode is, where do you stand on the ending and the Rey Skywalker? Because I've watched video reactions of the theater and people are like, don't you effing say it, boo! Like there's some funny reactions out there where people like hate it. Again, I think, what did you expect based on what this movie looked like it was going to be? But Rob, where do you stand?
It seemed kind of cheesy to me. I don't see her seeing herself as a daughter of Luke. I see her thinking I could believe her as being more connected to Leia. I could see her feeling more like an adopted daughter of Leia than Luke. So, but because I don't really feel like she has that much of a connection to him throughout this whole process, and I don't know. I don't have real strong feelings. I think it's maybe kind of cheesy.
That's completely fair. Harrison, where do you stand on it?
Pretty much the same. It's cheesy. It's out of nowhere. It's really dumb, but I mean, who didn't see it coming? I mean, I don't know how else to say it. I mean, she buries Anakin's lightsaber in sand, which is probably like spitting in his Force Ghost.
What a slap in the face.
But and then she takes his name and she's like, have that with my orange saber. I'm walking out of here. I don't know. It's really cheesy. It doesn't work in the moment, yeah. And is there something about like the journey of Rey that I'm really invested in? I think that moment is incredibly rewarding. Yeah, for the character of Rey. But again, it's just not executed that to that level. If I wasn't personally invested in the story and journey of Rey, that moment would mean nothing. And it could have meant a lot more if handled differently. So yeah, it's just, it is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I will say though, as much as like, again, like I could care less, like, yeah, it means a lot to her, but the execution along the way is like, you didn't take us on a cohesive journey to feel something for her for taking the Skywalker name. The music though, and her looking at the two suns, I don't care about the Skywalker name. I care about that's supposedly the bow on this 40-year journey. I love that part. Her looking at the two suns with the music playing.
I gotta
love
say,
it.
when she opens up an orange lightsaber that's made from her staff and then looks at the suns, like I think that's the best bow to finish out Star Wars you could have made in the messy ride it's been. A good way to finish it up.
Yeah. Wow. A lot there between parts 1 and 2. Certainly a lot of fun. I think secretly in about 2 or 3 days, Rob will text us and say, "Hey guys, I have a Last Jedi T-shirt and poster in my room." We'll see. Rob's a proud guy. I don't know if maybe not the T-shirt, but
I'm gonna get a tramp stamp of the poster of the theatrical release poster.
I will pay for that, or Ryan Johnson's face.
Oh my gosh!
So,
you should do the logo, but like kind of spin it upside down so it has Kylo's lightsaber and like with the crossbars upside down, so his lightsaber's like going right to crack.
Don't ever, for some reason, lose a bet. But with all that being said, we talked about rankings. We talked about a little bit throughout it, but I mean, this is the time where, Rob, we got a lot of ranking talk on the Facebook page, and we're going to post all 3 of them. So, I'll go first. I'm just going to list my rankings. I'm just going to list the films that we talked about. One person said you forgot the Clone Wars episode, and I have that posted on the Facebook page, but for the purpose of capping this Star Wars anniversary show episode, I'm just going to rank the movies that we talked about. So for me, starting with number 1, The Force Awakens. Number 2, Empire Strikes Back. Number 3, Rogue One. 4, The Last Jedi. Rob, I know you'll have that at 2 or 3. Star Wars.
You guys talked me into it.
Yep, I knew it. Star Wars at number 5. As much as we just said, I don't care, that like literally that's the theme song. Rise of Skywalker 6, because I don't care. I have fun with it. Number 7, Return of the Jedi. 8, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. 9, Solo. 10, The Phantom Menace. And 11, the Christmas special. Attack of the Clones is somewhere way down. No, Attack of the Clones is 11. Rob, go next. Harrison, I'll let you cap off the rankings.
Sure. So we're going to start at 1. For me, it's Empire Strikes Back. 2, A New Hope. 3, Rogue One. Based on a recent rewatch, I firmly had the courage to bust that in. As we've said, the original trilogy just you can't remove your emotion from Star Wars. So I've got Return of the Jedi at 4, Force Awakens at 5, Revenge of the Sith at 6, Rise of Skywalker at 7, Solo at 8, Phantom Menace at 9, Last Jedi not in last place but at 10, and Attack of the Clones somewhere at 473rd.
Seems fair. Harrison, where do you got them?
I gotta say that what I have right now, currently, I mean, my ranking of Star Wars is constantly changing. So as of right now, that I'm prepared just for this episode, starting at number 1, episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and then 2, Empire Strikes Back, 3 is Rogue One as well, 4 is Last Jedi, 5 is Star Wars: A New Hope, 6, again, exactly in line with Matt, I don't care, Rise of Skywalker, and then 7, The Phantom Menace, 8, Return of the Jedi, 9, Force Awakens, 10, Solo, and 11, Attack of the Clones. Now, I will also add in this, like, whenever I do rankings, like, I feel bad, like, putting a movie at the bottom, like Solo, for example, like, that movie's not bad, like, I feel like I have to defend it, that by no means, except for like the first majority of Attack of the Clones, I don't think any of these movies are bad. It's just like there are some that are clearly superior than others.
I think you're apologizing for Solo because it's touching Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, that's precisely.
Like, I think that's how that goes down. But Harrison, we line up for a lot of things. But again, like, I think if we reconvened in 6 months and I said, hey guys, just off the cusp of your head, resend me your rankings. I think certain films could, Rob, we talked about this too, like, could interchange at any moment where it's just like, well, I don't know, on this day, do I like this movie better? Or like, do I just feel a certain way because it hit me? And I think that's, again, if you can just appreciate, like, hey, let's talk about Star Wars and I don't care why you like a certain movie and I don't. It's so fascinating to talk about these things.
I think very much like what we talked about when we ranked the MCU. I feel the same way about this, in that I'm pretty confident in my top few picks. I'm pretty confident in my bottom few picks. It's that middle third that I think could probably swap in and out just based on what I've seen most recently.
Yeah. This, I'll just repeat it. This was a lot to talk about. 2 parts covering 11 movies. Wow. For me, so much fun. Guys, thank you so much. Like, this has been, I have had an absolute blast doing this with you guys. And
same.
I can't say thank you enough.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to come on and do it.
Yeah, I mean,
blast.
It's been fun. So, like, closing off this episode, to anybody, and there was, Rob, you saw it, and Harrison, you kind of looked at it too. There's a lot of people that responded to this post on the Facebook page. These episodes are getting posted. Harrison and Rob are going to send me over their rankings so that we can post those as like a list as well. And continue, just, let us know what you think of these 2 episodes, these part 1 and part 2. The feedback that we got and just some of the interaction was great. I'd love to see more of it. I know Rob had a blast interacting. So if for any reason this is your first listen to Matt Goes to the Movies because of the Facebook post, welcome. Thanks for listening to the show. I hope this encouraged you to listen more. If you're a return listener from myself, Rob, because he's been such a big part of the show, and Harrison, he's such a big part of the show for me too. I know it's, they thank you as well. So again, thank you so much. This has been awesome. It started off as like a little pet project for me during the pandemic. It's turned into something that I love doing. I have a blast. I gained a really good friend in Harrison from this, and I've gained a closer friend in somebody that I already knew before this in Rob. So, Rob, again, thank you. Harrison,
Of course.
Thank you. For Harrison, go check out The Basement Binge if you haven't. I love his show. I give him credit for me even starting this in the first place. So thank you guys so much for Matt Goes to the Movies. This has been a special episode of Star Wars for the 1-year anniversary of this show. Look forward to bringing you many more episodes, especially with these guys. Thanks for listening.